everybody. Welcome. So glad that you could join us today for our live stream conference on what it means to be a digital church. First of all, we just want to welcome all of you out there. We say thanks to all of our BGAV churches and our church leaders. You are the partners that help make these kinds of events possible, and we're grateful to have you today. Also, we want to thank Tim Holt and First Door Marketing. They're our sponsors in this event today, so they've kept this event free for us. And you're going to hear a lot from Tim today, and excited to tell you more about the product, the resources that he offers to churches, as well as the great teaching he's going to offer you. My name is Gary Long. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Baptist Journal Association of Virginia. Joined the BGAV in October of 2020, and after about almost 25 years as a pastor, several years as part of a digital sales and marketing team in the internet business, and also an entrepreneur. Had a lot of opportunity to learn about marketing and to grow in my own skills, and to really see the value of what digital marketing can do for churches. Today we're going to be talking specifically about what does it mean for you as a congregation to go forward into the digital space as you help your church to grow and as you help your church to reach others for Christ. We're going to be talking with a lot of different folk today. Excited to have you listen in on some conversations that Tim and I have gotten to be a part of. We're going to hear from John Upton, our executive director, as he talks about the theology and vision of a digital church. We're going to hear from Glenn Akins. He is the Yoda of data here at BGAV. Also have an exciting conversation with Josh Russell, who's a filmmaker and a professor of film, who's going to be talking to you about what live stream preaching can learn from filmmaking. And then, of course, we're excited to have DJ and Raj and Brandon from Tim's team over at First Door to talk to us about some of the nuts and bolts of the tools that you need to make a good, strong presence in the digital world with your church. Now, we do have a few rules for the road today. They're easy ones, no problems here. The first thing is just to know that we're gonna have about a 3-hour runtime. We're gonna have a live chat going on the side. We'll try to answer all those questions as they come up. And you're also gonna have some opportunities to interact with some other digital resources, so be on the lookout for links as they come along. We will take 2 breaks. We'll take 5-minute breaks on the hour. So 2 of them throughout the 3-hour time today, so you don't have to miss any content. We'll put a timer up and you'll know when to be back so that you don't miss anything. And then finally, I want to make sure that you know that on this coming Sunday at 1 o'clock, we're going to re-air this with a live chat feature. So if there are any of your church folk that you want to get involved who couldn't attend today, we certainly will be excited to invite them on Sunday. And then once it's all wrapped up, we'll make the content available for download next week. There is some bonus content. We had too much to get into today's 3 hours. So when you see that additional content come out next week via email, be sure to check that out as well. Hope you enjoy the conference, and thanks for being here today.
Well, hey friends, my name's Tim. I'm the CEO of First Door, and I am so excited that we got to be a small part of putting on the Digital Church Mastery Conference for your churches over there at the BGAV. We're so excited to be able to bring some great fresh content for you, bring some great value to your churches, and hopefully take a subject that's really difficult, this subject of digital church, and compress it down into just a 3-hour conference to really give you some tools to move ahead. I'll be talking to you throughout the conference about great tools that you can manage, but first I want to start off with this idea of understanding how and where to win on social media. And you may wonder, why are we starting out with social media if this is the Digital Church Conference? Are those two different? And the reason I'd say no is because the church has always needed to be a part of the public square of the day and age. So a little bit further back in the day, the public square was the newspaper. The public square was the newspaper. If you got your church in there, you'd reach new people. And then it turned into radio, and then it turned into TV, and these were great public squares. Way back in the day, the public square was simply the public square, or the temple courts in the Old Testament. But no matter what, let me tell you where you saw disciples of Jesus that were making disciples. You saw them in the public square. And so when it comes to the digital church and making your digital presence great, social media has got to be a central feature of what you do in your strategy. Well, guess what? 80% of Americans are on social media for at least 2 hours a day. And that's across rural, suburban, and urban settings. No matter where you are, 80% of Americans are sitting on their phones looking at social media 2 hours a day, which means that's where your church should be investing in. But when we do studies, it's crazy. 80% of Americans are on social media, but only 2% of American churches actually have any sort of social media strategy. So even you being a part of this, you're in the top 2% of churches. That's crazy. And that's what we really want to help you with today, is define your strategy for the public square of social media. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through the big 4 social media platforms of 2021. The big 4 social media platforms of 2021, and we're going to talk about them in 3 ways. Because in order to develop a great strategy around social media, you've got to understand 3 things about each platform. One is audience. You need to know who's on the platform. Because what's unfortunate is I see too many churches trying to reach young teens or young families on Facebook when that's not Facebook's primary audience. Does that make sense? So we want to make sure that we know what platform we're going after whenever we're reaching out to people. 2, you need to know the key phrase of that social media platform. And I'll explain that a little bit later, but it's a really easy phrase that will help you win on social if you can remember them as you build your strategy. And 3, we're going to talk about a really basic strategy that your church can utilize starting today on each of these social media platforms. All right? So let's jump in. First of all, I want to talk about Facebook, because Facebook's kind of the social media site. Facebook has become the dominating force in all social media platform presence. They've not only bought Instagram, but they've bought out all of their competition. The only competition that's managed to survive alongside of them has very often had to integrate into them in some way because they're just such a dominant force. I'm sure if you've seen movies or read articles, you probably know that it was started by a young college student named Mark Zuckerberg in a college dorm campus under controversial circumstances. And then over time, it grew into this massive behemoth of a network. In fact, we find that there are 2.1 billion active users on Facebook right now around our world, which means that if Facebook were a country, it would be the most populated country in the world. That's crazy by active user count. It's been a part of social change. It's been a part of political change. And love it or hate it, Facebook is a dominating force in our social media scene today. And here's what I say about Facebook. Every church should be on Facebook because that's where the most people are. Just by population density, the most people are on Facebook. And so every church should have a Facebook presence. Now let's talk about the 3 things with Facebook. What are the 3 big character qualities of Facebook? Here you go. First of all, audience. Your audience is primarily 35 and up. The audience of Facebook is primarily 35 and up. There are definitely outliers to that. There will be younger people on Facebook, but even younger people on Facebook don't spend most of their time on Facebook. Most under 35s have at least 2 social media accounts, and they don't spend most of their time on Facebook. But if you are looking to reach 35 to 65-year-old plus, Facebook is the place where you should be because that's where people are spending their time in that age bracket. Now, what's the key phrase of Facebook? Here it is. Ready? Show me and tell me. Show me and tell me. Facebook users want to be told things and they want to be shown things. That means they want pictures with big captions. Whenever you create a Facebook post, you should be doing lots of pictures, lots of video, lots of visual things, but you should also be including decent sized body of text. Don't go too crazy long. Don't do 5 full paragraphs, essay style, but doing 2 paragraphs on Facebook is very, very normal. It's very, very normal. Show me and tell me. So what we're gonna do in our example today for today's session is let's take the example of a kids ministry. We wanna tell people about the kids ministry that we have. So in our strategy with show me and tell me, that key phrase of show me and tell me, what we're gonna do is we're gonna post a ton of different pictures of our kids ministry if you feel comfortable in that space. You're gonna post pictures of kids, teachers, the crafts, all of those things, and then you're actually gonna describe those pictures in that paragraph text that you write out as you post things for your church. Because the Facebook users want you to show them and tell them. Show them and tell them. Now, third thing, what is your strategy? What should your strategy be in Facebook outside of just living in that show me and tell me space? Well, the first thing is this: utilize all of your tools available to you. You see, Facebook has become ubiquitous for having as many tools as they possibly can. They have posts, they have video posts, they have live posting, events, check-ins, giving. They have everything your church could ever need on their platform, and Facebook really wants you to utilize their services. So here's what that means for you. When you utilize their services, Facebook has a thing called the algorithm. In fact, every social media platform that we have has an algorithm. And the algorithm allows Facebook to, through computerized technology, decide which posts go to the top, which events go to the top, and which ones stay at the bottom when someone opens up their phone. So when you open up your phone and open up Facebook, the things that you see in place number 1, place number 2, 3, 4, all of those are decided by a computerized algorithm that decides if that is the best content to keep you engaged on their platform. So how do we win with that algorithm? We utilize all of the platform services of Facebook that we can. So if you have an event coming up, you've got a VBS or you've got a youth camp, or you have just a big church potluck coming up next Sunday, make sure you use the events page on your church's page to create an event. It's a great way to win with the algorithm. Pastor, if you'd like to talk to your congregation in a live sense and answer questions, on Tuesday say, hey, tomorrow I'm going live at noon, and then use their live feature on your phone to go live and talk with people. The more platform systems that you utilize, the more often, the more likely you are to go up in the algorithm. That includes consistent posting, utilizing live video, all of those things. So make sure that in the show me and tell me part of the posting that you're always utilizing all the tools that Facebook has available to you, okay? That's gonna help you win on Facebook with those 35 and up crowd, okay? Now, let's talk about number 2. Number 2 is Instagram. By size, it's the second largest social media platform. Coincidentally, it's owned by Facebook right now. You'll notice there's a lot of linkage between Facebook and Instagram. When you post to Facebook, you have the option to also post to Instagram and vice versa. But I always recommend, because Instagram is a different kind of platform, as we're gonna see than Facebook, that you do 2 separate posts anytime you wanna post something to Facebook, because there's a different crowd, there's a different key phrase, and there's a different strategy when it comes to Instagram, okay? So let's talk about the audience. First of all, the audience is between 21 and 35 years old on Instagram. 21 and 35 years old. And one of my favorite ways to describe what Instagram's audience is like is they are that young family crowd that so many churches want to reach. If you are looking to reach the young family crowd and you do not have some resources poured into being on Instagram, then you may not be reaching young families as fast as you'd like to. It's very, very important in that 21 to 35-year-old age range, especially that young family segment that people are very often looking for to find themselves on Instagram. Coincidentally, I'm a dad, married to an amazing woman, and I've got 2 beautiful kids that are 4 and 2 years old. And guess what platform I spend most of my time on? It's Instagram. That's where we live in that young family segment. So you want to spend some time, strategy, energy, and resource in that social media space of Instagram, okay? So let's talk about the key phrase. What's the key phrase of Instagram? Don't tell me, show me. Don't tell me, show me. You see, with Instagram, it is a picture posting service. What you're gonna notice when you fire up Instagram is the biggest things on the screen are your pictures, because that's originally what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a social media site for photographers. And as it became more popular, more and more people started utilizing it, and they just posted pictures of their food, you know, those foodstagrams kind of a thing, and their families and their kids, and so many great jokes came out of that and stuff like that. But the reality is people are visual. We want to see what's going on in our friends' lives. And so Instagram is a place where people don't necessarily want to read big bodies of text. They want you to show them a great memory. They want you to show them something impactful. Show me a video, show me a picture, show me something that elicits an emotional response, an awe or a frustration or an excitedness. Show me something that gives me an emotional response, and that's how you win on Instagram. That's how you win on Instagram. Don't tell me about it, show me it. Utilizing stories, utilizing posts, even live videos. Show me what you're trying to talk about. Don't use big, long bodies of text. Use smaller bodies of text and give me big, impactful, powerful pictures. Okay, that's where for some of you, if you have great video editors and photo editors in your church, utilize those people for your Instagram posts. utilize those people for your Instagram posts. Now, here's your strategy. Your strategy is to be consistent and on brand. Consistent and on brand when it comes to Instagram. You want to choose pictures at the beginning of the week that you will post every single day. Doesn't matter necessarily what time you post those, as long as it's a time where people will open up their phone and see it. But what really matters is that we do it daily, that we post daily on Instagram. But we also want to be careful and post on brand. We want to be sure to, and what does on brand mean? It means that you have a certain look that you're going for, a certain emotion that you're trying to get out of people, and you're making sure that all of the pictures and media that you post are right around that brand language. So if we're looking for those young families, we want to post about our kids ministry very often. As a parent, I want two things in my brand language for whenever I look at a church. I want to feel secure. That's first and foremost. I want to know that my kids are in a secure place. So being able to post pictures of, hey, this is Mike, he's our kid's security guard, and he makes sure that our kids stay safe as they're having a great time. Here's Devin, she's one of our teachers. She's actually accredited with the state, so she knows exactly how to take care of kids. That makes me feel safe, and it makes me feel like I could bring my kids there. You see how that's on brand? But what we don't want to do is show kids jumping off of a 10-foot slide if we're trying to showcase safety. I know we're getting a little in the weeds there, but again, it's really important to stay on brand. Decide what message that you're trying to show, and then show that message. That second thing that I want security, but also want to see that my kids are going to have a great time learning about Jesus. So being able to show kids with their Bibles open, with their coloring books, where they're coloring those awesome little pictures with the Bible verses at the bottom. I want to see that stuff. And you see, as we build the strategy around young families on Instagram, and we stay on brand, we stay consistent, then when we talk about our key phrase, show me those pictures, and then just say, look how great of a time our kids are having. With that heart emoji, perfect Instagram post. Or with that security guard. This is Jeff, our security guard, who makes sure our kids stay safe as they learn about Jesus, heart emoji, something like that. Perfect Instagram post. And you see, that keeps you on brand. And if we do that consistently throughout our time on Instagram, making sure that we stay consistent and on brand, that we live under that rule of don't tell me, show me, then we're gonna live in a great space on Instagram. You're really gonna be able to win in that platform. Platform number 3 is Twitter. Now, Twitter is a really interesting one. Twitter is one where it is actually, where Instagram is all about pictures, Twitter is all about text. It's all about trying to convince people and talk to people and have great conversations on Twitter. That's what Twitter is all about. And Twitter's a very interesting one because where the rest of ours have a very, very defined age range and group, Twitter tends to reach a lot of different people, but we can start to narrow it down. You see, millennials utilize Twitter the most of their audience. That millennial age range of that 20 to 40-ish kind of an age range, 25-ish to 40-ish, that's a great age range for Twitter, but it has a very specific use, especially for your church. Twitter is all about conversations. You see, most millennials these days, we don't want to get onto a phone. We may text, we may live chat, but if I could tweet at an organization, then I'd rather do that than call them. I know for some of you older folks, that may sound kind of crazy, but it's honestly true. In fact, let me tell you just a short story to illustrate my point. I was once on a Southwest flight from Dallas over here to San Diego where I live, and I got on the plane and it was just a horrible, horrible experience. I had a seat for my wife and then it got taken and she had to sit somewhere else in the plane, and I talked to the flight attendant. It was just a terrible experience. And I tried to call Southwest as soon as we landed saying, hey, this was really bad. You guys should get this together. I know I was that guy. I was that Karen kind of thing that was complaining, but I was frustrated. And I couldn't get through to anybody in the hour that I had them on the phone. But guess what I did? I sent one tweet. I said, at Southwest Airlines, super frustrated about this experience. This really bothered me. And within 5 minutes, I was given a different phone number to call through Twitter, and I got a free plane voucher for the next time that I flew with Southwest, because Twitter is a place where conversations happen. It's where brands really build this idea of conversational speaking. Now, we've talked about their audience, which is millennials, but let's talk about their key phrase. Their key phrase is this: tell me and engage me. Tell me and engage me. Utilize Twitter to tell people about what's going on in their church. Utilize Twitter to tell people about what events are happening or where your kids' ministry is and all of that stuff. Tell me about it, but then be ready to engage with me. Be ready to answer my questions, because Twitter is the place where people ask the most questions. And so making sure that you've got that Twitter app on your iPhone, or you've got some sort of push notification to your phone that allows you to respond to people in a timely manner is so important. In fact, the strategy is this: post it and then turn on the notifications. I know that sounds silly, but that's the strategy for engaging well on Twitter. You see, putting out things and getting likes and retweets, those things are great, but the most important currency on Twitter is that currency of relationship. It's that currency of, you asked a question, so now let me respond to you. So make sure whoever's running your social media has that Twitter app downloaded to their phone, they've got those push notifications turned on, or they have email notifications for desktop, whatever you decide to use, and make sure that after you post and you get questions, always respond to those questions. Always respond to them well, with positivity and pushing them towards Jesus, but make sure you respond, because that's what people expect on Twitter. And that's number 3. Now, the 4th social media platform is the newest one of the bunch. It's called TikTok. You've probably heard of it, or you've seen teenage girls dancing around your church in front of a mirror with their camera. That's called doing a TikTok, by the way. And TikTok is a space where short videos are housed, typically between 7 and 10 seconds long. And it's where typically preteens, teenagers, and young adults go to express themselves through video and have fun. Most of them are really funny. Some are about social causes. But oftentimes, TikToks really just follow trends, and they follow funny video trends, and people jump on board, and they try to get their videos to be the most seen on the platform. Now, like I kind of alluded to, the audience of TikTok is primarily between 13 and 21 years old. 13 and 21 years old, which means that teenagers and really young adults, that's the primary audience for TikTok. And they're on there making videos, having a great time, dancing around, gaining comments, gaining favorites, gaining shares, all of those things. It's really a place to push yourself into a higher light. It's push yourself into a bigger limelight on the scene of TikTok. In fact, some of the most famous TikTokers, is what they call them, have become extraordinarily wealthy and extraordinarily successful. Just like your biggest TV stars or YouTube stars, TikTok stars are really starting to make their way into the really successful and well-maintained and established scene, okay? But let's talk about the key phrase of TikTok. Now, I want to remind you of the audience. The audience is between 13 and 21 years old. So if you're trying to reach young families, TikTok isn't your place. But if you have a youth ministry or a junior high ministry, high school ministry, college ministry, you should have a TikTok for those ministries. It doesn't have to be your church's TikTok. I would encourage you to have it be, this Baptist church's youth ministry TikTok, but you should have one because that's where the students are. Students very often are not on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. They're on TikTok in that youth and teenage age range. So you want to make sure that you have them. But here's the key phrase: follow the trends. Follow the trends. You see, TikTok is built and based around trends. It's based around the newest, hottest type of video that you should make, whether it be a trick shot video or a new dance type video. It's all built around trends. And so when you're in youth ministry, the thing that you should be doing in TikTok world is making sure that you know what the trends are, but utilizing those to build a great student ministry presence online and maybe giving it a Jesus spin on it, but really being creative and having fun, which leads us to our strategy. Have fun and get great advice. Have fun and get great advice. Having fun means that TikTok is not a place for something like this, where we're just talking to a camera. TikTok is a place for a great time, dancing around, having fun, making funny videos, funny skits and sketches, things like that. Have a great time on TikTok. It's how you'll grow the fastest, especially in youth ministry world. But also, get advice. I was talking to one of my buddies about TikTok recently, and I said, man, even as like a social media guy, I sometimes feel like I don't get TikTok. And he said, dude, it's because we're getting old. And I'm like, dude, I'm 28 years old. And what do you mean I'm old? It's just, we realize that we've passed that age range limit. But can I tell you who I've gotten the best advice from? My younger sister, who is 15 years old. I can call her about TikTok. She'll talk to me about it for an hour. And I guarantee you, if you have a youth ministry that's reaching young kiddos, you sit down and ask them, hey, what's the biggest trends going on right now in the TikTok space? They will be happy to tell you, and they would be happy to make a video with you. Empowering your students is so important in that TikTok space. So you've heard all about the 4 key areas. I hope you've learned something. I hope you've learned about audience, the key phrase, the strategy around all of these great platforms. You see, all of these platforms, they have a different audience, they have a different strategy, but they can all be part of the global strategy of your church of making new disciples for Jesus who eventually make more disciples for Jesus. And I'm going to be back in a little while on this conference to talk to you really about how we make disciples who make disciples online. I can't wait to see you there, but until then, we have some incredible speakers lined up for you today. So I'm going to turn it back over to Gary, who's going to take us from here.
Tim, thanks for taking that time to tell us all the many places where church can thrive in the digital platform. Up next is Raj Nair. Raj is an experienced creative in the work in the area of video and has worked everything from major network in New York to large parachurch globally, lives out in Vista, California. Raj has got a real passion for helping video to connect believers and unbelievers on difficult subjects. And so for the next few minutes, we're looking forward to hearing from Raj. Raj is also a part of the First Door team. And if you are a subscriber to the First Door social media marketing plan that BGAV sponsors, you'll most likely have run across him already. So we look forward to it. And Raj, thanks for your time today. Take it away.
Think about this. Every day, 720,000 hours of video is uploaded to YouTube. Now, check this one out. This is even more astounding. I actually had to write this down because I didn't believe it when I saw it. How many hours do you think is watched on YouTube a day? Million, 3 million? 1 billion hours of video is watched on YouTube every single day. So as purveyors of the gospel, we need to know how to utilize this medium and understand this medium. And I'm gonna be honest with you, in our short time together, I'm not gonna be able to get through all of it, but I think we can tackle a lot of the hard subjects. And so today I wanna answer a few questions. Number 1, how do you use video to have a difficult conversation? And number 2, how do you use video to deepen relationships within your church and with folks that are not in your church? Now, I've worked in video for a long time. I've had a very random career working in college football and in Hollywood and doing documentaries and all this jazz. But I think I've gained some wisdom that I want to share with you, and I pretty much narrowed it down to 6 points. Again, we could talk for a long time, but let's hit these 6 points and try to equip you with the knowledge and wisdom that I've gained. Number 1, you are the message. Your enthusiasm, your passion will translate. If you could be talking about something super interesting, but if you don't care, it's gonna be obvious. You know, they always say the camera puts on 10 pounds, right? Well, I'm actually working on my dad bod, so I can relate, don't judge me. But if the camera puts on 10 pounds, the camera also puts on an authenticity monitor. If you're talking about something and you're just saying it, it's gonna translate. So when it comes to making videos, be passionate about something. And that could be, if there's someone on staff at your church that actually has a passion for a subject that you're talking about, put them on camera because it's gonna translate. And when people connect with the person, that's the whole ball game. At the end of the day, if you want people to connect with your message, they need to connect with you. And that comes from being comfortable. That comes from being passionate. That comes from being in control of the video. Now, if the video subject, I'm trying to think about something, if the video subject was about UVA and Virginia Tech, I have a lot of interest, I have a lot of curiosity, but I don't really know the ins and outs. So I would just kind of be up there talking about the Hokies and the Cavaliers and hoping I'm saying things right, but I don't really have a lot invested in those two schools. So I would more or less, and you can fake it till you make it, obviously, but I think if you wanted to have someone like a YouTube channel or someone who was talking about Virginia Tech football, you'd want an alumni, you'd want someone who grew up in Blacksburg, you want a passionate person to talk on that subject, because at the end of the day, before they connect with the message, they're gonna connect with you. Number 2, hit the head and you'll hit the heart. Now, I've worked, like I said earlier, on a lot of documentaries. In fact, we just got done doing a documentary in Auschwitz with an Auschwitz survivor. At the end of the day, what we've realized about documentaries is this: stories impact the soul, which then inform the head. If you were just targeting someone's brain, that's great, but the next thing comes along and knocks it right off. But if you inform someone's soul, and that's the power of video, is that you have the opportunity to actually change someone's heart, change someone's soul, and that's why I love video. I'm super passionate about video because I think too long this platform has been used. It's been used for good, but it's been used for ill. And I think, man, what would it look like if we, the church, started focusing on redeeming this platform, redeeming YouTube, redeeming Facebook? I know it's a long battle, but at the end of the day, that's where the people are. Okay, number 3. This is a little bit more logistical, but you have to understand that how you navigate different platforms with video is going to be different based on that platform. So if your church is creating a 30-minute documentary about, Virginia example, how awesome Virginia Beach is. I'm not sure why you do that, but let's say you're doing that. That documentary is going to look a lot different than your 30-second Instagram post, which is going to look a lot different than your YouTube update. So just realizing that different platforms have different ways of attacking things. On YouTube, on social media, this is the really frustrating part. People make up their minds within like 3 seconds. And then again in 7 seconds, whether or not they're gonna watch your video. So if you're trying to reach your neighborhood, the unchurched, the post-church, the people that have never even heard of your church in your neighborhood, realize that within that first 3 to 7 to 10 seconds, you need to grab their attention. So what does that look like? Well, if you look at a lot of popular YouTube channels, what they'll do is they will put kind of the spicier quote of that video as the first 10 seconds of the video. Why? Just to grab people's attention. So if there's something that you're looking to do more of an outreach, this isn't a video that's necessarily going to be playing in your church. This is a video that's going to be playing on your social media platforms with the goal of the Great Commission, bringing people in. Realizing that first 10 seconds is important. And that is just a across-the-board thing with social media. If you're looking to grab people's attention, realize you have 5 to 10 seconds to actually do so. Again, that's different if you're showing a documentary that you're making in church, then you can be a lot more long-winded. But different platforms have different goals. It's all based on these really long algorithms, which again, we at First Door are more than happy to have those discussions, but just realize that what's important is that you grab people's attention when it comes to social media videos. Number 4, this kind of relates a lot of what I've been talking about. Don't underestimate the power of video. I think video could be the greatest gift we've ever been given of the Great Commission, of evangelism, of giving people hope, letting people know about the love of Jesus. We have the ability to reach people. Your church, wherever it might be, you have well, first off, you can target where your video goes. We can talk about that later, especially with your First Door coordinators, but you have the ability to reach people that you would never have been able to reach because of video. So don't underestimate this thing. We've seen, especially with some of the documentaries I've done in the past, people come in to a video with a predisposed idea, with a bias, with a wall up. And again, that's the power of video. Is it, if you do it right, and you're passionate, and you connect, and you take your time, and you are really focusing on reaching people's hearts, you can change people. That's incredible. It's a huge power. So I only have one bullet point on this, which is pray beforehand, because man, we have a gigantic, massive, powerful tool. I mean, think about this might be outside my balance, but think about what Jesus could have done if he could have had his sermons just out there on social media. They would have gone super viral. And also, brings me to a point. You're trying to go super viral with the video. Yes, you can have caps, and yes, you can have something funny, and that'll maybe make that video go viral. But at the end of the day, if you look at videos on YouTube, they get a lot of views. It goes right back to what I've been saying. It's people who know what they're talking about, that are interesting to watch. Why? Because they're passionate about said subject, and they take the time to feel something and relate, and and allow their emotions to permeate that video. I'll go back to a Virginia Tech example. Let's say when the video is about when Frank Beamer retired from Virginia Tech. I know a lot about college football because I used to cover it for ESPN. But let's say that video was about that. Well, you could have someone who really genuinely felt something and gave a really stirring recap of that career, and that video would get a lot more views than just an explanation because it's reaching people in the heart, which then gets people's minds going. Number 5, how to address difficult conversations, how to address controversial conversations. You know, you as a pastor, I'm sure, or whoever's watching this, you just say the word COVID and there are ears going up and people are ready to rock and roll with their opinions. Or abortion, or giving. Woo, let's talk about money. How do you address difficult situations? I find it multifaceted, but really I think at the end of the day, if you're trying to address a certain subject, whether let's give an example of drug addiction, okay? If you have someone who has been redeemed out of drug addiction by the power of Jesus, that should be the person that is being interviewed for the video. That should be the person that's talking about the video. That should be the person that is the front and center in this video. Why? Because their experience will translate into actual passion, which will come across as heart-transforming, palatable, digestible information, which is actually soul food. It permeates because that person's story comes through. And so if you've kind of been paying attention, since I've been talking for 17 hours at this point, at the end of the day, it's the story. It's emphasizing the story. And the story comes through based on emotion, connecting, all the things I've been saying. But addressing hard conversations, you can add music to really drive home the emotionality of that subject. But honestly, when it comes to having hard conversations, highlight voices that have experience with that thing. If you're talking about a giving campaign, and film that. Don't just talk about it. All right, lastly, number 6, how to use video to build relationship. And I think this goes right back to the idea this is a powerful medium. You can use video to build relationships with your community, with people that are in your church and not in your church, people in the surrounding areas. If you want to, people in Virginia, across the country and globally. That is the power of this medium. How do you build said relationships? It's stories. It's man, if I had a negative experience in church, if I had growing up I was hurt by the church, or you know, I intellectually I can't jive with the church, whatever it might be, if you can give them that experience, that story, that at least pops a hole in that bubble, that at least makes them think, that at least gets their defenses to come down a little bit, that's miraculous. That's transformational. And that's the power of video. So I just want to encourage you that you can do a lot of things with video. Most importantly, I think for our subject is building relationships, reaching out, doing the Great Commission. This medium can allow you to do that. So again, just be yourself, be passionate, be authentic, and realize that if you reach someone's heart, you just might change their head. So I want to encourage you to pray before you make videos, and go out there and use this weird platform called video to reach people with the gospel.
First off, Josh, just thanks. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me today and being willing to help our pastors around the state and around the country to be able to think about how we do digital church work. So far in the conference, we've talked a lot about social media. I want to shift the conversation to talk about how pastors work in a live stream environment, to talk about virtual communities of faith. And the reason I want to talk to you is because, of course, you're a filmmaker and you got a lot of great experience helping communicate truth and story through visual. So the context of our conversation today is really to just know we're talking to pastors out there who are struggling with just preaching Sunday in, Sunday out, preparing worship plans, and trying to do it in a live stream environment. There's a lot going on, and so my hope in this is first of all just to get to know you a little bit. And so tell us about yourself. What's your experience and what kind of projects are you on, and just kind of catch me up. What's been going on for you?
Yeah, cool. So, I was raised primarily in Assemblies of God churches, and met my mentor when I was 12, actually at Camp Moyoka, which was the Moody Church in Chicago's Camp Moyoka. And he made kind of sort of Billy Graham-esque, like family films and Christian films and stuff like that. And my mom was actually putting the campers into their cabins, and I wanted to be a filmmaker since I was like 8 years old. I've never wavered. Like, I was obsessed with the idea. And so she found out there was a filmmaker he had shot a film at that camp and then came back the next year to be a counselor as a way of saying thank you for offering that as a location. And my mom found out that he was a camp counselor there, and she's like maneuvered me into his cabin, and we met, and I spent the entire week making a film, marshaling all these campers away from all their activities and making a film, and it was just madness,
What was the film about?
It was ridiculous. I just remember there were a gang of kids, of like 30 kids, against one. I have no idea, but it was terrible, obviously. But he was fascinated that I had this obsession and just all the ambition, and he was like, wow, this, And actually there's a really interesting story is he went to a Baptist church, and about a month before that, someone came up to him and said, we don't really believe so much in prophecy here, but I had a dream that God was going to bring someone into your life, a young person into your life who's like a young filmmaker, and you're supposed to mentor them.
Oh, wow.
And then a month later, he met me at camp, and I was doing this thing. He's like, "Oh, here he is. Check the box, So that happened,
You never know what's going to happen at church camp.
You never know what's going to happen at church camp. So, anyway, I was like 12, and I said, "How old do you have to be to come to work, to legally work?" He's like, "I think you have to be at least 14." So I'm like, "Well, in 2 years, I'm going to come work for you." And then I lived in Chicago at that point in time. He was on the North Shore. And so we moved away in those 2 years. We moved like 2 hours west of Chicago. And so then we kind of a little bit lost touch, and then we reconnected when I was 16, and he was working on a film, and I started traveling. I got my license. I would drive into the North Shore of Chicago, meet with him, and spend a weekend, and did some post-production work on that film. And then that turned into a 9-year apprenticeship. So like pretty much right out of high school, I spent 9 years studying under McDougall. Edward McDougall is his name.
Cool.
And so that was my start. And then I started teaching at Columbia College in Chicago, teaching film there, kind of right at the tail end of that when my sort of apprenticeship, if you will, was over. And then I went to DePaul. I taught at DePaul for 9 years, and now I run the film program at Western Carolina University. I'm the co-founder of a nonprofit with the goal of connecting higher education to the film industry. It's called Local Cinema Studios. Mm-hmm. And I'm a partner at Iris Indie, which is a for-profit indie film production company. I've written, directed, or produced about six or so features. I'm now working with a mid-tier studio. Actually, we have several films lined up. First time in my life I've got a slate of films lined up, which is fun.
Good for you.
Yeah. So there's cool things happening, and I've won Best Picture, Best Director at multiple international film festivals, which is tough to do. It's tough to get into them, let alone be awarded, and so that's kind of my list of credentials, I guess, if you will.
Well, you and I got to know each other first at church, and then I became fascinated, took one of your screenplay writing classes, and have really enjoyed you as a professor and as a friend, of course, and a fellow churchgoer. But what I found taking your class was that I was introduced to some concepts which I think I knew and understood, but had them reframed for me. And I want to talk a little about some of those concepts today, and just kind of quiz you and see how much you remember of your lectures.
All right. I'll see if I can pull them up.
But one of the things that really struck me early on was that the character arc, the moral arc of a character, played out in story is what makes film fascinating.
Yep.
That we're interested in character.
Right.
And when I caught that concept as a veteran preacher, I mean, I've been doing it a couple of decades at this point, it changed the way I read Scripture. It changed the way I looked at the people in the Bible. And so you and I've had other conversations, but I just want to ask you to expand on kind of the moral character arc, and how do you see that informing preaching not just in a live stream or virtual environment, but just preaching in general. How could we improve as preachers by simply understanding character arc?
So I'm going to give you one answer, because there's a lot that I could unpack here. We could probably talk for 3 hours, on this. But so narrative, all of narrative and the study of narrative, I think we can say that it starts with a Greek philosopher, 5th century BC, named Heraclitus, who is considered the father of Logos, and he says that the only constant in the universe is change. So there's nothing that we can observe or experience, or even really comprehend, if you will, in the whole universe that is static. Like as far as we can tell, there's no such thing as that which is static. What even is static? It doesn't even make sense if you spend any time thinking about it. Change is a constant, change is everywhere all the time, and we know this because like when we look at a rock on the atomic level, we see movement. Everything is moving over time. It's changing. So if you start with change, and then you can say that, Aristotle talks about complete action, which is basically a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's just like taking a process of change and framing it, basically. And so if change is everywhere all the time, and if we're experiencing change all the time, well, what's interesting about a story? Because sort of change is sort of the water in which we swim, And so then the question is, well, if we do a little thought experiment, we say like, okay, the dog grew to be very large. Okay, is that a compelling story? The dog grew to be that was a big dog. Okay, well, if you're a dog breeder, that might be interesting, and depending on the kind of dog and how big it got, and if it's Clifford the big red dog, then it's really fun, but it's not necessarily a compelling story that a dog grows to be very large. But if the dog grows to be very large by eating small children,
extreme, but
right. So, and the point is to be extreme.
We call him Cujo, right?
Right. That's right. The point is to be extreme, because the Bible's extreme too, right? I mean, everything under the sun that you can imagine, every moral infraction that you can imagine, is represented in the Bible, right? And so, what happens is that elevates a process of change from something that is strictly a chemical process, a natural chemical process that we experience all the time, and is sort of, like I said, the water in which we swim. It's just normal for us, and it's not compelling, right? But when you have something that insults your moral code, that it's wrong and insulting and awful to think about, a dog growing to be very large by eating kids, And so what it does is the hairs go up in the back of your neck, your body is responding to that, you're feeling insulted by it, right? And you want to deal with that, you want to correct it, you want to right the wrong, right? You want to bring justice to that situation, right? So that's actually creating engagement for the audience. So story is really about change, but it's actually about moral change. And it's about moral change both for the characters in the story, and most importantly, it's about moral change for the audience. And so when you think of story as moral change, it kind of unpacks, it can unpack well, first of all, it's perfect for pastors, right? Because that's, right, pastors are like in the business of moral change. Like that's their business.
Stock and trade, yeah.
So it makes sense that pastors are storytellers. It makes sense that they're interested in stories. It makes sense that they do what they do and that there's an audience for it, that people want to go every Sunday morning and listen to a story and understand moral change, right? That makes sense because that's what sort of moves us, right, and keeps us compelled. So the essence of story works so well with spirituality, right, and the work of pastors. So if we're thinking of why films can make for better sermons, filmmakers study the same thing, right? They're studying moral change. That's what they do. And they the movies and shows that we watch are the top 0.0001% of storytellers in the world, the best in the world, right, telling us stories of moral change, right? So to think of filmmakers and screenwriters as being something separate from pastors is a mistake, right? They're actually doing the same thing. One just has the goal of making money, and hopefully the other has a goal of like doing some good in the world.
Yeah, right. So Josh, all the preachers that I know, they're different in their approach to preaching. Some of them are interpretive, some of them are prescriptive, some of them are grand storytellers, but all of them rely on the same underlying story of the truths of Scripture, and there are many, of course, as well as central truth of who God is and the narrative of God. But in your mind, what are some of the stories that are really rich, that show this character arc that pastors should be thinking more critically about as good examples of what you're describing?
Yeah, right. So, well, one thing that I think is advantageous about thinking from the perspective of a screenwriter or a filmmaker is that we understand that everything in the universe is in a state of motion, and it's a mistake to look at anything outside of the framework of movement and change, right? So we should first be looking, that should illuminate any narrative in the Bible that we pick out. Mm-hmm. We should be able to go from, Cain and Abel to David and Saul to, the prophets to, even Jesus and his journey. When he's praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, it's a plot point. He's like, if it be your will, take this cup from me. He's struggling, right? He's actually in the process of change himself and is going through and questioning and, having to sort of expand who he is in order to fulfill what he's supposed to do, So he's actually changing. But I think that, especially for Christians in America, and maybe this is like universal, I don't know, but looking at the disciples in each one of their journeys as, okay, what's the moral arc of each of these disciples and how did that come about, right? And I know N.T. Wright's great. He gets into this a lot because he's looking at sort of the story from the first century perspective, and so he's illuminated a lot related to sort of, the expectations that there is going to be a political revolution, and that's Jesus is actually going to be a in-person, real political, leader, and they're going to use violence, to overthrow Rome and to establish God's kingdom physically on earth in that place and time. And the journey that the disciples go through as Jesus is actually completely inverting their expectations, and in so doing, helping them to understand what the gospel really is, So I think that looking at the first century from the first century perspective and looking at the disciples and watching their arcs and how they have a moral arc and how Jesus sort of exhumes that or pulls that out or draws that out of them is a good place to start. If I had to pick one, and just put my finger on it.
Sure. Well, twist for you then. We got let's imagine our mind's eye. The pastor preaches Sunday in, Sunday out, and he's got to also visualize a virtual community out there that he doesn't necessarily see. What about the change in motion in their lives? Could you speak to
in the pastor's lives or in the audience?
Well, the pastor too, but the hearers of the sermon,
right.
The hearers who are present in the room when the sermon is preached.
Right.
Lots of motion going on in all this.
Right.
Not just from the story side, but from the living side.
Right. Right. That's a big answer. Yeah, there's a big answer there, and I know that we're gonna probably talk about this later, but I'll tap on sort of your idea of the incarnational experience of church, right? And so you and I are just 2 feet away from each other right now, and I can touch you and we can look at each other's eyes and we can read each other's facial expressions and feel each other's energy, and that's a very incarnational experience, because I'm present with you and you're present with me, and we're feeling very close, in large part because we're physically present with each other, you know, and so that matters. And it makes a big difference, and when you give a sermon in person, because you can look into someone's eyes and you can, the difference between a concert in a coffee shop, in which the musician's just feet away from you and they've completely entered into the moment and they're playing the music and you feel their soul with the music, and it can be an absolutely transcendent experience. Whereas if you go and watch, whoever, U2, and you're in a giant concert hall and they use a lot of video production and lights and stuff to create spectacle for people who are in the nosebleed seats, way back there. But it's different than hearing Bono solo, in the coffee shop.
In a group of 12.
It's a categorically different experience. And so that's kind of what we're looking at. And so when we have an audience that is strictly virtual and they're not in person, there are there are some limitations there, and we have to use different techniques in order to reach out and attempt to pull some of that incarnational experience, into someone's living room. Okay, and that's actually what filmmakers do. That is what filmmakers do. When you watch a movie, if the movie is working, like, you lose the sense of being in your living room, right?
Suspension of disbelief,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And there's a lot to unpack there, but that's actually what film production is.
Yeah.
It's creating the sense of an incarnational experience. Again, I wouldn't go so far as to say it is incarnational. And Dalton Pope, come here. This is Dalton. He's behind the camera. And you were just talking about the film that you did, that you were just working on. It was a Mel Gibson film that you're working on, right? And you were talking about the experience of seeing the actors and being present with them and what that experience is. And would you, that experience is going to be categorically different than people who are watching the film, right?
Absolutely.
Right, because you're there in person, right? And I'm showing Dalton here for a reason that we'll talk about later on. But I just want to sort of expose it. This is our only guy. he's doing both of these cameras. He's doing the sound. Yeah. He's a superstar. He's all in one. So anyway, sorry to drag you in. But Dalton was just working on a film set, and he was there with famous actors and directors and all the 40 people and the lights and the track and the cameras and all that kind of stuff. And he was having a much more incarnational experience that was unique and different than the film experience. But filmmaking is designed to create an incarnational type experience in your living room, right? Tons of technique behind that, and we can unpack that later, maybe even
Let's do it now.
You want to unpack that?
Yeah, I want to do it now, and I want to throw an illustration at you.
Curveball.
It's not. It won't be a curveball to you because it feeds straight into what I think you're going to say, and that is when COVID first hit. They sent everybody from Broadway home, and I'm a late night TV junkie. I love all the late night comedians.
Yeah.
And I watched those guys struggle so hard with an empty studio. Yes. Do you remember this feeling?
Yes.
And watching Colbert, who's normally funny, or Jimmy Kimmel, who just makes me giggle like a kid.
Right. Guys on SNL from their living rooms.
They couldn't land anything.
Couldn't land
They
it.
just at first.
Yes.
At first.
Yep.
And then something changed. And I don't know if it was within me. And I got used to that pause. Okay, they're pausing because there would normally be laughter here, so I'm going to make my own laugh track in my head.
Right.
Or did they change the way the jokes landed?
Right.
And I think it was a little of both.
It was, I think.
I do think it was a little both. But what we got a glimpse of all those late night guys was humanity.
Yep.
You realized, okay, this is a human being in his bedroom or his office at home or whatever.
Yep.
And it's even like the local weather guy. He's now doing newscasts from his bedroom.
The experience becomes totally different. Like the little girl walking into the background, that famous shot where the maid comes in on all fours and she's pulling the little girl out of the background, and the guy's trying to give some CNN or I don't know.
Yeah. So where I'm going with this, in that churches, pastors, we do this day in, day out. We're not production studios. We're not high quality, high dollar ventures, most of the churches. So what's the beauty in that to you?
Yeah.
The realness of it. Say something about that, because I know you got some thoughts about authenticity and the viewer experience.
So this will I think we'll unpack a little bit later, but I would give a warning here. And the warning is going back to the idea that, the goal for pastors is different than the goal for filmmakers.
Yeah, clearly.
Right? I mean, filmmakers, it's art and commerce, but it is commerce, and it does have to make money, and so that's baggage that the filmmaker has to some degree that the pastor doesn't have. It's also an advantage because the pastor's goal is to do good, right, and to care for people, right, and so I would argue that what we saw happening in COVID is we saw vulnerability, and it's a different thing. It's a different thing. The high production value, high gloss, we can perfect that. We can perfect the art of a joke. We can perfect the art of camera, and when the crowd needs to laugh now, and we're going to raise the laugh, and everybody laughs. Applause. We can perfect that magic show, but it's a magic show. right? It is a magic show.
It reminds me of a pastor I knew who used to have he called it his amen stick. It was literally a sign on a stick.
Amen.
And he would stand, and he had a cowbell. He says, "This is my profundity alert. If I ring the bell, you're supposed to go,
Right, that's great. It's fun and funny, but and I wouldn't poo-poo anything, but I would just give a general warning that the gospel, Christianity, faith is actually a fundamentally different beast. It's not entertainment. That right? When I go to see a movie, I'm paying money to be manipulated. That's the whole purpose, is manipulation. And that's a dirty word, we're not supposed to use it, but actually you're paying money to be manipulated. And if they don't emotionally manipulate you, right, so that you feel things and have a catharsis, right, then you're angry.
You feel like you didn't
get what you paid for, right? The filmmaker didn't deliver, right? Yeah. So that's, and there's a whole art to that, but it's manipulation and it's a magic show. And faith is the opposite of that. Faith is not. It's not designed to be manipulation. It's not designed to be a magic show. And actually, one of the biggest criticisms of religion is that it's a magic show and that it's fake, right? Faith is authenticity. It's vulnerability. I mean, think of the seminal event that has birthed Christianity. God incarnate in a human being, naked, tortured to death on a cross. Right? That is vulnerability, the essence of vulnerability. Naked, killed by his own creation, absolute vulnerability, right? When we put on high production value stuff at church, I think that generally speaking, we're doing a big disservice. We want to look good, we want to be polished, we want to seem professional, and I get that, but the essence of spirituality is vulnerability. Right? It's the truth. It's not a persona, right? And so what we experienced in COVID was we experienced people leveraging vulnerability in order to create a different kind of experience. And that's why we have like influencers now and people on YouTube who are like YouTubers, right? What they're doing is they're sort of creating the experience of incarnation. They're drawing an incarnate experience sort of into a entertainment space, right?
Yep.
By creating a sense of vulnerability and transparency. So this is an advantage because films are really expensive, right? It takes a lot of Daltons, to make a good movie. And Dalton has been training. Dalton's a graduate from my film program, right? And he's been training forever. And he's put in lots of years into doing what he's doing, and he's still like sort of just at the beginning of his career.
Thank you, Dalton.
Thank you, Dalton. So it's expensive. It takes tons of training. All the gear is very expensive.
Sure.
The techniques that are used are super complex and sophisticated, and we'll get into them a little bit. But again, it's a magic show. Filmmaking started as a magic show. We can go all the way back to sort of the beginning and unpack that. It literally is a magic show. One of the first big filmmakers was a magician. So we don't want to go that route. It's a mistake, right? We don't want to become filmmakers per se. There is a form of filmmaking though that actually serves transparency and vulnerability really well. And we can, direct cinema, for example, which was developed in America in the late 1950s and early 1960s and was a form of documentary filmmaking, which is meant to sort of capture unscripted reality in its rawest, truest form. They would even use like 12-year-old kids sometimes, or 14-year-old kids, so that the camera was like not too high, it was at a sort of a very neutral angle. And the kids, especially in the culture at that time, it was like seen, not heard. People would ignore kids, right? And so the kid would be there with the camera and everybody would be like, it's just a kid with a camera, right? And they just act normally, And it's hard to be on camera, as you and I know right now.
Yeah, sure.
It's hard for us to be on camera. We're normally on camera, It's weird to have that lens looking at you, But you can get comfortable with it if you've got like a 14-year-old kid walking around with a big camera on their shoulder, And so everybody would just let it go, and then they'd be, and you're trying to get sort of an raw, unvarnished look at reality. So there's a lot of techniques that we can use to sort of be vulnerable and capture vulnerability, And that's the direction we need to push.
Well, Josh, we're going to take a turn. The rest of the conference is filled with a lot of technical stuff in the digital church environment, and we're going to get back to some of that now. But I hope you'll stick around, and maybe later in the conference we can come back and dive in deeper in some of these things.
Love that.
I'm so pale.
You're on it.
Today, snow is crippling much of the Washington lowlands.
Mangudu.
Once it's turned on, the sign will spell out Deli Cat Essen.
Can you demonstrate for us what it's like to brush our teeth's pet just a little bit?
Certainly. It's going to be areas of drist and mizzle. Drist and, what am I saying here? Mist and drizzle. I literally combined both.
It's confirming the ground is now good to say. Oh, you've been joined by a beautiful lady. It's a man, actually, Derek. Who's?
I just kept hearing it. I'm ducking and everything. Died just in the house. I got scared. I dropped my hot pocket.
For the last 2 years, hundreds have landed in the Summit County Medical Examiner's office.
My brother used to break in our house and steal the TV.
But now he's dead.
We'll probably sit around and cook some soups and eat bread and desserts and just get all fat and sassy.
Wow. Như vậy thì
A slight chance of some participation? It's rain. It's going to bring a possibility of some rain that will be moving into our area.
Did you grab anything when you walked out the door?
I grabbed nothing but 2 Tortino's pizza out of the refrigerator and my doggy, and we left. That's it. I tried to grab some other things, but they wasn't even worth it.
It's okay. Come a little closer. I'm going to stay over here by Joni.
Do they know each other?
No, hold him tight. Hold him tight. Hold him tight.
I am.
Hold him tight.
I am.
You got him.
I am.
Oh, it's okay. All right.
All right, Joni, you got it.
First and last name, please.
Erica O'Donnell.
And can you spell first and last?
First-Last.
I meant your first and last name.
Well, the sign says that it's 4 quarters for an hour, but a quarter only gets you 15 minutes. Yeah. So if my math is correct, that's not an hour.
That's not an hour.
Not an
but
hour.
It is. And also...
A quarter, 15 minutes. Welcome back to Fox 2 News at 9 a.m. Time once again to get you caught up on your news headlines. For that, the Hamburglar.
It's your birthday. I'll let it pass. Thank you. No, I won't. I'll get you later.
Scott, Matt is live in Hernando, Mississippi, where there's been spottings of a cougar, and that's not it. That looks like a house cat, but we're just feet away from where a local man rolled his cell phone video on what some say is a cougar. I'll be right back with a live report.
But what we can say is that it looks for him in Uxbridge also something where there may be some concern. He had a 12,000 majority
12,000!
here. It's now down to 5,000. Some people think it won't happen again.
It won't happen again!
Thanks very much, Tim. Lots of people trying to get in on the action.
Hello and welcome.
I want to say thanks again to Josh Russell for the time that we could share together to talk through those wonderful topics that you just heard. Josh and I will also be working with a live learning lab in the coming months. We've built a new video studio at the office here in Virginia, and we want to invite pastors to take part in a live interactive experience. It's going to be a 2-day retreat with lots of opportunities to actually get hands-on these tools that we've been talking about today. So if you have interest in that conference, be sure to drop that. We'll be dropping links and email contact information in the chat box as we go. And we invite you to join us in Richmond for that. The next segment is back to Tim, and he's going to be talking about the components of the Glance to Giver program, which is the social media piece that he has helped BGAV produce for our churches. Many of you are already participating in that plan. I want to urge you to pay attention, especially though, don't check out on us here, because there's some new features, some new product features rolling out in today's iteration of the software that will be a really great help to you. You're going to learn some new things, even if you've been using it already, and I think you're going to be blown away with the new features that his company has added to make the use of the program even easier. There is a 30-day trial being offered to sign up with the Glance to Giver program. And of course, here at BGAV, we endorse this and are very excited about what it's already proving that it can do in churches. So with that, we're going to turn things over to Tim and look forward to hearing more from you, buddy. Take it away.
Well, hey friends, Tim Holt here again from First Store. So excited to be joining you back in the middle of this conference. And what a conference it's been. I've loved learning a little bit more with you about the digital church, and I can't wait for you to see about the sessions that we have ahead of us right now. But if I could just take a pause in this wondrous moment of learning about digital church to connect with some of you out there that are probably the realists of the crowd, where you start to look around in the digital church and all the things that we could do, and you start to not only see opportunity, but you see the time cost that comes along with it. You recognize that you're a busy person, that your hours are already working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and you're pushing everything off until the next week sometimes just because you're a busy person. You've got sermon prep to do, like everybody knows about, but what people don't know about is the elder and deacon meetings that you have to get ready for next weekend, and the offering that you have to count up and put into the general budget and make sure that you're hitting that. Then you've got care calls that come up right away where you got to drive over and be at someone's house for the next 5 or 6 hours trying to save a marriage. These things take a lot of time, and what I'm guessing is if I told you, hey, digital church is great, take advantage of it, but it's going to take an average of 10 more hours a week, you'd look at me and say, dude, I don't care how good it is, I don't have that time right now. Well, friends, that's why First Store is here. You see, we've developed a program with the BGAV that's designed to let you become a digital church that fulfills the Great Commission online while not adding any hours to your plate. That's right, no hours. You're not going to have to take any more time outside of an initial quick setup to make this digital church thing happen in your church. If you're interested, keep on listening. Now, some of you have already heard about this Glance to Giver program, and thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you again. But if you've already heard about this, I want to tell you that since you've heard this has become a much more valuable product. It's become a much more time-saving product. We've actually really whittled this thing to become something really incredible for churches. So stick around, things might have changed a little bit, but let's jump into what the Glance to Giver program really is. You see, my goal at First Store is to allow churches to move into this digital church space, to become Great Commission fulfilling churches online. And my big metric goal that I try to hit with my churches, and we have hit with our churches, is helping them grow in their membership and their monthly giving. Because if a church is growing in membership and monthly giving, it means that the digital church is working. And it means that the Great Commission is being fulfilled. If people are buying into your mission and then they're buying into your mission, it means that you're fulfilling the Great Commission and that you're moving people along a discipleship pathway. If it's going up and to the right, our church is primarily successful. But if it's going down and to the left, well, then we need to adjust some things, don't we? And so that's what the Glance to Giver program allows us to do in the digital space, is see that bar go up and to the right. So let's talk about what it is. I want to help your church win in 3 separate areas that make up the digital church. First of all, I want to give you quality, consistent social media posts. So like I said in my session before, with consistent posting and taking advantage of the tools and all of that, instead of you having to take advantage of all those things and having to move in those spaces, you allow us to do that for you. You allow us to create great, consistent social media posts with you. Second, we're going to help you engage in digital evangelism. You see, digital evangelism is a brand new frontier for the Great Commission, where we can utilize Facebook's advertisement and Instagram's advertisement systems to actually reach new people outside of your congregation, to engage them in conversation, and then to bring them into your congregation on a Sunday and move them through a discipleship pathway. And then I want to give you continuing development for your digital church presence. So that's what I want to give you. And I want to walk through what each of these three things look like and what you would get if you decided to jump into this digital church world with us. So first of all, let's talk about those consistent posts. I want to take the hard work out of a consistent social media presence for you. Here's what we do. You buy into our program and we schedule posts for you. All you have to do is approve them. You look through them, make sure that they look good for your church, you click approve, and we post everything for you. That's a big change from when we actually first started. We used to send out a digital pack. Now we just say, hey, let us post for you. You just tell us which ones work for you and which ones don't. No time added. All you have to do is say, sounds great, and then we post for you. Your digital presence is taken care of. We're going to send you a digital file with all the posts and written copy, and then you have a chance to substitute your posts to give your church a unique presence. We're not just going to give you a post for every day for all the platforms that you choose to be a part of. You're actually going to get additional ones. So if you say, hey, this post over here doesn't look that great, but I love this post, we're going to substitute those for you. Now, two things that are very, very, very important when it comes to being a part of the BGAV. One is autonomy. You need to choose which posts you'd like to be able to be a part of, which is why we give you so many. We don't want you to feel shoehorned into a digital presence. We want you to be able to build your own. We want you to be able to say, hey, I want to look different from all the churches that are out there. And that's what we give you the opportunity to do through our consistent posts. We post for you. You get to make sure that they look good on your end before they get posted. And then secondly, regional approval. I'm a guy from Southern California. Most of you are from the Virginia or Eastern Seaboard area, and those are two different worlds. And so that's why when my team creates these graphics, we actually send them over to the BGAV first. They look through them, make sure they speak the language of the BGAV before we send them out to be posted by you. Now, we are introducing something brand new, just launching here at this conference, called geomapping. Now, geomapping is such a cool thing because if your church is within 20 miles of one of our partner churches, our system will automatically change your feed to be completely unique from theirs. Completely unique from theirs. Which means if you're in this Baptist church and within 20 miles there's another one already using our service, or if they start using our service, we'll actually develop your feeds completely different from one another, your advertisements completely different from one another, so that you make sure that your presence to the people that matter in that local area that you're trying to reach only see your church as unique. And that's very, very important to you, and so it's important to us. So with our geomapping feature, you can be sure that within your 20-mile radius, your church will be a completely, uniquely posted church, okay? Now let me tell you why consistent posting has worked to bring members back to our church partners. You see, we've been doing this for a while, and we've begun to see that when people post consistently, people come back to church. People that they haven't seen for a while come back to church for a couple of reasons. First, it does keep members in the know of what's happening. Our posts that we post consistently are constantly driving people to your weekend services, to engage with you in conversation, to engage with you in relationship. And as people move back into that relational space with you before they were distant, they're so much more likely to come back to church. The second thing is this, it actually does create that healthy FOMO, or fear of missing out, of what's happening at your church throughout the week. When we post events for you, when we post things around you, you get to say, people go, hey, I'd like to be a part of that. I see my friends are going. And we've noticed that the churches that utilize our services, not only do their members from outside the church grow, their members start to return as well. And then it also facilitates really deep and fun relationships where people spend 2+ hours a day online. All of our posts drive people towards having fun and having great relationship with one another and joining us at church and praying for one another. And when we do that online, people get to actually interact not just with your church, but with one another. And that's where the digital church becomes really, really beautiful. Is this idea that just like in Acts 2 church, we get to live in communion with one another even when we're not in the same physical space, which is so, so cool. And I want to help your church take advantage of that, again, without adding any hours of work to your already full plate. You let us take care of it. All you have to do is respond to the posts and be a part of the conversation, which is what we love doing anyway as pastors, right? Now let's talk about number 2. Let's talk about digital evangelism. Our digital evangelism are basically, you can think of them as Facebook and Instagram ads, but they're a lot different than what other advertisers and marketers do. You see, when other advertisers and marketers get onto your Facebook page and they get onto your Instagram page, what they're gonna do is they're gonna try to increase your likes, they're gonna try to increase maybe some comments, maybe some shares, but what we are all about is reaching people outside of your church walls with relationship. We want to take people from outside of your church walls, start them in relationship with people that are inside, and then move them towards your church and move them on a discipleship pathway. See, our advertisements are very Great Commission centered because we believe that the gospel moves at the speed of relationships. And so if what we can do is through our advertisements, instead of increasing some arbitrary number, if we can actually start real relationships, man, that's what changes lives. And that's what we've seen as we've put this out to churches that we've worked with, is that this really does change lives. It really starts real meaningful relationships. So instead of just numbers, we get real disciples through our advertisements. And that's what we're gonna give you. We're gonna give you time-tested advertisements to make sure that people go from outside to inside. So how does that work exactly? Well, it works along this little diagram here. First of all, we're gonna create targeted glances. Our social media advertisements are gonna showcase your church to the local area with the goal of reaching the unreached through relationship. And then we're gonna find interested guests. Say we're gonna show them to 2,000-3,000 people over a month period of time. And then we're gonna find the people out of that 3,000 that are interested in your church. They reach out for relationship. Our system helps you set up ads that they're gonna curate Facebook messages, Instagram DM messages, all those things that really allow your people to reach out and talk to them and say, hey, come be a part of our church. And then we're gonna connect you with those people and move them along the pathway towards becoming potential givers, members and monthly givers at your church. We'll provide the training to show you how to relationally market your church to those people. We'll actually train the people inside of your church on how to utilize Facebook to reach out to people outside of your church. We'll utilize the training to show people on Instagram, how do you utilize an Instagram presence to make new disciples outside? And your people actually get to become championed as part of your evangelism team towards reaching people outside of your church. And friends, the cool thing about these things is, now that we've been doing this for a while, we see this not only works in urban and suburban centers, but if you're a small church of 50 in a rural platform area, this is working there too. And it's incredible what happens. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you how this works. I want to show you the proof that this actually makes sense and this actually works. I want to show you the case of the Bridge community. Over a 6-month time frame, we were able to see some incredible things at their church. And just for context, this is a smaller suburban church, so really akin to what we work with you guys. And just all of these things are great. Listen to these great stats. Impressions up by 34%. Post-link clicks up by 281%. Total audience up by 40%. Net growth up by 288%. These are great numbers, but any marketer will give you those numbers. The thing that makes our program different, and the reason the BGAV has chosen to work with us and allow us to sponsor this conference for you, is this contact sent number right there. Such an important number. You see, what contact sent means, as we reached out to people outside of the Bridge's walls, 498 people not just responded, but said, hey, have someone give me a call. Have someone give me a text or an email. Reach out to me because I'm interested in what your church is doing. Friends, this can be the same result at your church. You can imagine what this would do to your membership and your monthly giving. And then finally, I want to give you guys training. My team is going to make sure that your people know exactly what they're doing in the social media space. That in the digital church space, whenever a new problem arises, if COVID 2.0, knock on wood, happens, we're gonna make sure that you guys are taken care of with training on how to best utilize your digital church. If a recession were to happen, we're gonna make sure that you know how to really up your online giving count through the digital church. And what we're going to make sure of is that you're never going to fall behind in the digital church space again if you partner with us. We will always have training from nationwide experts right to your door, right to your video screen on how to utilize digital church platforms really, really well. You're going to get things like a social media 0 to hero course where we'll take somebody on your volunteer team that doesn't even have a Facebook yet and showcase to them how to become from social media 0 completely all the way to social media hero. We'll give you some BGAV Q&A sessions. We'll give you digital church mastery courses, all of these things and more. And then the final thing in our training that's not listed here that I love is you're going to get the cell phone number of a digital expert on my team, which means that they are going to run your account. They're going to make sure that you're okay, that you're doing great, but you're going to have a cell phone number, an email, a textable number where anytime you have any sort of issue, you can reach out and give them a call, give them a text, and they are a phone call away. It's not some operating system line out of this country. It is a real person on a cell phone ready to answer your questions. You'll never go the social media journey alone when you go with First Door, and that's awesome. Now, let's talk about really quickly, what does this cost when you use another service? Well, you can see at the bottom, but consistent posting, relational advertising, consulting, and training typically is going to cost you around $5,000 per month. And friends, if churches paid $5,000 a month to do this, I wouldn't be talking to you. I'm just kidding. But it does cost a lot of money, and a lot of us can go, that's not really doable for us. That's why our program for a church of any size starts at $130 a month at a quarterly rate. How cool is that? Instead of $5,000 a month, we're talking about $130 per month at our level 1, which is $390 per quarter. Here's what that package is going to give you. It's going to give you all the posts for Facebook that we talked about. We post those for you. You don't have to touch those posts. We post those things for you. We're going to give you a how-to README file for implementation. You'll get a step-by-step video file. If you'd like to implement these yourself, no problem. But then you're also going to get advertising. We're going to set up those advertisements for you to build those relationships within your community. You're also going to get access to all the training the BGAV has to offer, a monthly resource email to make sure that you're on top of your game in the social space. And this is a great package for people that are just saying, listen, Facebook sounds like the audience that I'm trying to reach. Let's go in on Facebook. Let's go in on Facebook. That's a great package for you. Now, our most popular package is our level 2 package, because what it allows us to do is it allows us to say not just Facebook, but we want to talk about Instagram, we want to talk about Twitter, and we want to talk about TikTok as well. This is our auto growth plan. It's our level 2 package, and it comes in at $1,250 per quarter. Again, when you think back to $5,000 a month versus $1,250 a quarter, that's a killer price. We're also going to post everything on Instagram for you. We're going to post everything that you need on Twitter for you. We're going to give you additional advertisements to showcase your church events. Anytime that you need one, you'll get one a month that is just your advertisement. So you got a VBS coming up or a church pageant coming up. Man, what a great thing to have a customized advertisement. Again, we'll show you exactly how to make sure that works. And then TikTok, we're going to give you access to our TikTok's trends resource. It comes out twice a month. And what that allows you to do is that allows your youth ministry or your college ministry to say, hey, here are the great trends that are working. Here's some great examples. And here's how you can use it for the gospel and how to grow your presence on TikTok. And so your whole church gets to really benefit from this level 2 plan. It's why this plan is our most popular right now, because it's an incredible plan. But if your church is looking for somebody to really build a customized presence, well, then level 3 is for you. We call this $1,499 a month or $4,000 per quarter. That it's called the agency level, and basically it's your complete social media presence customized. We'll take care of customizing every single post for you. We'll customize every single Instagram post for you, Twitter post for you, everything. We'll give you 3 completely customized advertisements. We'll train your entire team in person or over Zoom, whichever you prefer. And it's a great way to have a completely customized church experience if that's something that you're looking for. So I want to put this all into perspective for you from a pricing standpoint. Let's go back and look at our prices really quickly. At level 1, we're looking at a $390 per quarter. At level 2, we're looking at $1,250 per quarter. And then at level 3, we're looking at around $4,000 per quarter. I want to point you back to our original goal of fulfilling the Great Commission online. And remember this, my goal is to help your churches grow in members and monthly giving. That's our guarantee. So if that's the case, let's just talk about what that looks like from a pricing perspective. An average income in Virginia is between $35,000 and $85,000 a year. Let's just take a super low number from that, and let's assume a less than 10% of your tithe at a $3,000 a year tithe. Let's pretend that a family comes in, one person works, they give less than 10% at the lowest income mark. And that's great. Let's talk about how that would affect your bottom line with our program. Well, if you go for a level 1, You'd only need one new member brought in from our program, our digital church program, to pay for 2 years of the program. And we estimate bringing you between 20 and 50 new members depending on your area. That means that one new member pays for our program and at least 19 add to your bottom line by the end of the year, growing your members in monthly giving. Level 2, 3 new members brought in, pays for 1 year of our program. We're going to estimate between 40 and 100. And then at level 3, 9 new members brought in from our program, pays for a year of this program. And again, average new members between 90 and 140. And what you can see is that our goal is to really help you pay for this program with the people that we bring in very, very quickly. And then it becomes an addition to your bottom line. It becomes an addition to your growth factor, a new vertical for your church. And I know that money's not the only thing that matters, but when it comes to leading a church financially, it's a big deal. And we recognize how big of a deal it is and how much responsibility we have in helping your digital church grow. So if you're interested, if you like this digital church thing, you're like, okay, Tim, how do I get started? Well, here's the good news. I'm gonna let you try it completely for free. That's right, 30 days, no commitments. You can cancel anytime. We're gonna post for you. We're gonna take care of your advertising, training. We're gonna give you that cell phone number of that person alongside of you completely for free for the first 30 days. Which means this, you go in at bit.ly/BGAV signups, type that into your browser. Even right now, it'll be in the live chat as well. And you type that into your browser, fill out your church's information right now on the spot. And then what we're gonna do is, you're gonna immediately have full access to the program. You'll get a downloadable file for all of these posts, and then our team's gonna contact you, get you set up with analytics, get you set up with these auto posts that we're gonna post for you. And then at that point, you'll be able to try it out for free. And instead of going to your deacon board or elder board to get this approved in 20 days and just bringing them this conference, you actually get to bring them your numbers that we'll give you. We'll say, hey, here's how many people we got to reach for the gospel for you this month. Here's how many conversations we got to start. Here's how many posts we posted. Here's all the analytics. You get to actually bring this to your board, your success to your board, and say, hey, this is working, we should keep going. So friends, try it out for free. You've got nothing to lose. We'll take care of you. We'll take care of making sure that everything gets taken care of for you. And it's gonna be an incredible experience for you. And I really hope this gives you a great in to this new world of digital church. Well, friends, it's been my pleasure being with you today. Thanks so much for taking some time to listen to this pitch. I really hope that it blesses you. And friends, as always, we love y'all so much. We pray for you guys so much ever since we started working with the BGAV. If there's ever anything you need, please feel free to reach out. But otherwise, I will see you in the program.
Tim, thanks again. And we really do believe this promise that churches can thrive. God is good and faithful. We really do believe that churches are meant to be thriving and successful. And the BGAV's promise to churches is that we're here to help you thrive. And there is no bigger proponent of who wants to see BGAV churches thrive than our executive director, John Upton. John had a chance to sit down with him in the studio recently, and we had a great conversation about the theology and the vision and the meanings behind what a digital church, an online church campus can look like. And so for the next few minutes, I want to introduce you to my boss and my friend, John Upton, who's got some great things for us to hear today.
I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today for the Digital Church Conference and how it is churches can master the skills and the techniques of being part of a virtual community of faith. I had a series of questions I wanted to ask you, just kind of get some input from you and your experience of all your many years of serving churches as a missionary abroad and, of course, as executive director for BGAV. In your experience, which is vast, we're interested in hearing what have you seen in the past about how the church has changed over time and what that might be telling us as we think about a digital landscape for churches today.
Well, Gary, thanks, and it's great having you on the team, and thanks for all you're doing and helping us have these kind of moments where we can talk about challenges facing the church and talking about how we can be innovative and use the moment and leverage the moment that we're in rather than being overwhelmed by it or intimidated by it. So I thank you for these series of things that we're going to be doing to just talk honestly about where the church is right now and where the church potentially has of going in the days ahead. So when we're talking about the digital church and sort of the journey of the church up to this moment in time, I think the church has a great history in its very beginning. When you go to Acts 2, I mean, I remember when I was a missionary in Taiwan, translating things into Mandarin was difficult enough. But telling many of the stories in the Bible, translating it from English into Mandarin, you got to admit, some of the stories in the Bible are pretty strange. They're odd. And people would just sit there and look at me like, am I supposed to understand what you're talking about? And the oddest one of all that I had trouble translating was the day the church got started. I mean, it's odd enough to talk about a room with all this rushing wind inside of a room. And of course, the question is, well, why would they stay in that room? And then you talk about over the heads of each person in that room was this dancing flame. Now, you got to admit, that's odd. That's strange. But what's funny is that's not the strangest thing that happened that first day the church was born. The strangest thing that happened that day is everybody heard in their own language. Here you had disciples who were speaking languages they had never spoken before, and they were speaking it with such clarity that everyone understood in their own language. So here you have this group, they're speaking Greek, they're speaking Farsi, they're speaking Coptic, they're speaking all the dialects of Africa, the dialects of Europe, the dialects of Asia Minor. And if that isn't strange enough, now you've got just this diversity of people talking, old, young, teenager, children, men, women. And all of a sudden, people are hearing in their own language the story of the gospel, and they're responding to it. So the church actually was birthed in translation. I think that's a fascinating way for the church to have begun, with everyone hearing for the first time the gospel in their heart language. I mean, they heard their name pronounced correctly in the heart language. This is a language they learned at their mother's knee. And this was being spoken to them in that particular language. This is what life was like the very moment the church came into existence. So I look at us today. We are going to have to learn how to share this gospel in the language of the heart that's around us today. And when I look at this emerging generation, their language of the heart is digital. This is where they live. People are working every day in the digital language. And we in the church have not learned how to be translators of the gospel in this new language. I think this is the hour that we have. COVID has done us a tremendous favor this way. And it's time now that we learn to speak a language of the heart that so many around us use all the time. And I'd really hate for the church to miss this moment, because they're just going to live their lives right past us and we'll never know what happened.
You mentioned COVID, and of course that's front and center in every pastor's mind around the country right now, regardless of denomination, theological stripe. We're concerned about how we rebuild, how do we recover from COVID. And we know that COVID presented a lot of challenges, but some people think it presented upsides, some opportunities here. Specifically, in this conversation about digital church, what opportunities do you see? What's the future here?
Well, I think, too, we got a couple of challenges as we move into the opportunity. It's probably good to identify some of the challenges as we move into this. Challenge number one is our pastors are tired. I mean, they're having to be technicians now, and they're having to be producers. I can't tell you how many churches I've been in lately where the pastor's up speaking and then runs to the back, adjusts the camera, runs back up for the next segment of the morning worship, runs back, or if I'm speaking, they're back there operating all the equipment, much of it, often their own personal equipment, because churches haven't invested yet in the equipment necessary to do all this. So I know pastors are going to be exhausted. The second challenge, I think, as we move into some of this, is the difference between community and connection. The challenge is going to be, how do we become the body of Christ? We know how to do that in person. How do we do that online with each other? How do we become on mission together online? How do we become discipled online with one another? How do we grow? How do we build a sense of being a body together? I think these are some unique challenges. Do I think they're huge and can't be overcome? Absolutely not. I think we can do this easily, but we've got to do it intentionally. Just having people online, we can tick off how many joined us today online. That's not adequate. We got to go the next step. Engagement, discipleship, on mission. How do we do that? And all kinds of plethora of questions come up with that, but those will be fun discoveries.
Yeah.
Just as being church is a fun discovery to me. Now we have a whole new arena of people. There are a lot of folk that aren't going to walk in our front doors, but they'll come online to visit with us. They aren't sure about what that church does. It would be as strange to some as a mosque would be to me. But they're willing to check us out online to see if we're trustworthy, if this is something that meets some personal needs they have. So I think those are some of the challenges. Now the opportunities. I think we have an opportunity to discover some things about ourselves as local church that are going to be just surprisingly fun. I saw this. Deborah was on sabbatical from Bon Air, and she said, I want to go to Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. Would you go with me? Sure. San Francisco sounds like fun, and what are we going to do there? What's Grace Cathedral? What's this big church? And they're doing some pretty cool stuff. So I looked it up, and I thought, well, actually, I would like to go to that. Because we have something called fresh expressions, that every church ought to have a fresh expression of itself in the community.
Sure.
What this church did is they reversed that process. They opened up their church to the community and said, would you like to have a fresh expression of who you are happen in our church building? I thought, wow, I hadn't seen that before. I want to go check that out. So Deb and I, we're up in San Francisco, and we go to the church, and we worship on Sunday morning. Turns out the dean of the cathedral, I knew. He was at St. Margaret's School in Tappahannock at the time I was in Urbana, and we had done some joint things together in the area. So we looked at each other and said, what are you doing here? And so it was kind of fun that two Virginians found themselves right there in this San Francisco church in the middle of downtown San Francisco, right up on top of the hill. And on that Sunday, they just didn't have a whole lot in worship. It kind of looked like a dying cathedral, just minimum people, all that stuff. People were wonderful. They welcomed Deb and I. We had a marvelous time. But to say it was a thriving congregation would be a bit of a stretch. Mm-hmm. But we really didn't go for Sunday. We went for Tuesday, that worship experience. And when I got there Tuesday, I couldn't believe what I saw. Now, this is fascinating. When you invite the community into your facility, all the sacred spaces for you and I get turned around in that setting. Sacred space for me would be pulpit, pews, the stained glass windows, gorgeous stained glass windows, the chancel area, the choir, all of that, the organ. Those are sacred spaces. When I enter a church, I sit and enjoy the presence of God with these pieces of the sanctuary. But when the community came in, the sacred space for them was not any of those things. It was the flat areas. It was the open floor in the back. It was the aisles. It was not the pulpit, but the floor around the pulpit. And over 1,000 young people, I would say 35 and under, gathered in that church with yoga mats on Tuesday. Mm. Now, they weren't taking over that church for a yoga exercise evening. They wanted that church to be church while they did yoga. And they were converting that church into something that they could relate to. And so here you had the pastor in shorts, the dean, my friend, giving a brief homily, you had the men's choir singing chants and 1,000 young people on mats, worshiping, exercising. And when that thing was over, I was walking past a bus stop, and one of the guys had a mat on his back, and another fellow came up and he said, "Hey, we missed you at church tonight, missed you in worship." And I said, "I had to work late." Man, I told my boss, I don't want to ever do that again. I'm missing worship tonight, and I want to get to worship. Wow. Here at a public bus stop, they're talking about worship, but it's so different than the worship that I was accustomed to talking about. This moment right now, a lot of folk are looking spiritually for hope, assurance. They're looking for peace. They're looking for something that makes sense of this world. If we could come at church with some fresh eyes and let the world speak to us, I think we could be in for some just incredibly fun new experiences.
Well, last question, kind of pulling back out 30,000 foot range. What do you see as the future for BGAV churches in this environment that we have here? What's the opportunity for us?
I was laughing the other day thinking, I guess we need to start thinking about hiring staff who know how to do digital church. Yeah. We're talking about churches doing it, and I thought, well, I haven't even asked that question about us. So I said, down the way, we're going to have to find some folk who know how to live in that space. Absolutely. And help train folk and be creative with folk in that space. They just can't figure out how you hire a 12-year-old yet. But anyway, because they're the ones that seem to do that easiest and quickest. So, yeah. But that's all right. Let's let them be our teacher. One of the things I think I've said for years, and I feel strongly about even more now than ever, the horizon for many of us, ministers and leadership in church, and our churches are getting older, the horizon that we see is so much lower than the horizon that our grandchildren see. Let's put them on our shoulder. Let them describe for us what they see as the horizon that God's calling their generation, and then let's help them achieve what God's calling the church to be in their eyes. I think that's the best gift we can give our kids, our young ones, our young adults. And they will be shocked, number one, but two, they will be bonded in a deep, deep way. I've already begun to see that happening.
Well, John, thanks for the time today. Appreciate you.
All right, man. Yeah.
Well, John, as always, thanks for your care, your wisdom, and your vision to help us at the BGAV with our churches and their growth and their future. Next up is Brandon West. Brandon is the CFO for First Door. He's also an independent business owner and has about a decade of experience in both ministry and finance. He's going to be talking to us today about the wave in online giving. Some platforms will be discussed, some tools and techniques. He's also going to be discussing the idea that your church's online campus is actually a financial asset for the church. So with that, we're going to send you out to Oceanside, California, and look forward to what Brandon West has to offer us today. Brandon?
Hey friends, my name is Brandon West, and as the controller of a church, I work personally with the finances. I work directly with an executive pastor, so I have a really good understanding that a lot of times when we have good intentions in the church, we ultimately have to fall back on this question: can the church afford to do that? So I'm going to share with you a little bit about the financial side of having an online presence, having a digital presence, and mostly just generally being in the digital age. How can that help your church financially in concrete terms? Because I know ultimately nothing else really matters at the end of the day if it's not a feasible plan for your church and your community. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about what the importance of having a social media presence for a church is, because there are definitive challenges in the world changing in that direction presents to a church, but there are also incredible opportunities that churches can now take advantage of. If you think about the way that the gospel has spread traditionally, you find all of these disciples and these preachers traveling to cities. And it's such an amazing thing that we live in a world now where someone in that city, someone in Ephesus can log in to Paul speaking at Corinth. He doesn't have to travel there anymore. And that ability to reach so many people can pose a challenge for churches, especially financially, as they find a way to fit this into their budget and train on how to use it and maintain a presence. But it also is an incredible opportunity that I think churches have to take advantage of to be present where believers gather in today's day and age. So first I'm going to share a couple little sobering statistics with you guys, and it's not to scare you, but it's to show the way that the world is changing away from some of the traditional platforms that we've come to rely on and towards some new mediums of social presence that a lot of churches might not be quite as prepared to engage in. One kind of sobering thing is that believers give less now than they did during the Great Depression. So let's just start off with that. There is a challenge to churches and there is an urgency to churches. There is a downward trend that churches do have an opportunity to reverse, but it's so important to recognize that there is this trend right now that giving is on the decline. Another really interesting thing is that campaigns. So when you give out a campaign to give and you try to raise money for a specific opportunity or a specific outreach, it has a 97% chance of failure if that campaign isn't shared 2 or more times. Now that's pretty incredible. What that means is if you don't have an online presence that is designed to engage your givers and your congregation to take part in the giving and to share it with other people, if that visibility doesn't happen, those campaigns are almost certainly doomed to failure. So there is a real challenge now that campaigns and a kind of social media presence where we post once a week or once a month and there's no real strategy, it unfortunately isn't enough. There is a huge social media world out there full of algorithms and professionals designed to put their content on the top of people's feeds, which means a church that isn't taking at least an effort to learn about social media and maximize their social media presence is going to lose a lot of these people. But there is fantastic news and a wealth of information and resources into how an online social media presence can greatly help churches and catapult them into a season of giving they might not have experienced in a long time. So let's talk now a little bit about a couple facts I'm going to spit at you guys and then give you a little bit more of an understanding of why these things are true. So here's a couple statistics. Churches that accept tithing online increase overall donations by 32%. 60% of average tithers prefer to give digitally and online. And then here's a really mind-blowing one. Churches with YouTube channels, Instagram pages, and prominent websites saw in the last year where the world was digital, 533% more donations than those that did not have a social media presence or any type of video presence on their social media platforms. Now, if you think about your church size and you look at your donations that you receive, now if you multiply that by 5.33, that number is going to look drastically different, and that could completely change the entire way that your church operates and all of the things that your church, the good that your church is able to do, and partnerships with you that you can make with local communities and local organizations. So when you think about this, it's not that a couple people might give, that you might reach a random millennial who doesn't get off his couch and he's on his phone all day. We're talking about an entire trend in the world that is moving digitally, and churches that adapt and have an online presence are seeing massive growths in giving, but churches who are not able to make an effort to get social media posts and to engage their congregation digitally are seeing their tithing fall and their average viewer base fall and their congregation dwindling. Now, there's something else kind of interesting here too, in terms of the importance of social media in general for churches, and that's that people in general are not less generous this day and age. The statistics don't show that to be true. The sad kind of reality is that churches as an entire organization across the United States have not necessarily made as well of an investment in a digital presence, that they haven't been able to capture as much of a percentage of that generosity that other organizations have been able to. So one interesting and kind of sobering fact is that overall, there has been a 16% decline in givings to charities and faith-based organizations in exchange for giving to things like crowdfunding and other community-led drivers of giving. So what this means is those opportunities are out there and they're easy to use that churches can take advantage of. We've already seen that churches who have made big shifts to get an online presence out there, to ask for giving and be able to receive giving online, have seen huge growth in their giving. But the churches that haven't have seen now an opportunity cost. And that's the world that we live in right now. Millennials and the younger coming up generation, they live in a world of constant stimulation, which means there's never been an opportunity where people have been able to, unfortunately, start to, in their head, create opportunities of, well, if I give to this church, what are all the 50 million things that have come across my feed today that I can't give to? And if churches aren't in that public space and they're not seeing anything on any of their social media feeds for what good the church is doing, if that visibility isn't there, the churches are losing an opportunity to reach a generous but a more spontaneous generation. And that's really the key. It's not that the church is dwindling. It's not that generosity is falling by the wayside and the church isn't what it used to be. It's not a doomsday story. Giving is relatively stable but slightly declining because it's losing in the church an opportunity to other forms of giving that are available and present in people's day-to-day as they scroll through their computers and they scroll through their phones. When churches make an effort to be in their congregation spaces, to remind their congregation the good that they're doing, it's now on people's mind to give, and churches have seen massive opportunities for an increase of giving when they've entered the social media space. There's one last thing kind of want to touch on this generality of why is it important to have a social media presence and what good does it do for the church body overall and for your church specifically. A lot of people, specifically pastors, are typically not my age. There are younger pastors coming up, but most people leading congregations, leading denominations are not 22, 23 years old, which means for them, there's this kind of feeling and maybe a little bit of traditional reluctance to say, well, what is this giving platform? This is gonna be new to people. What's really important to understand is that this form of giving is not new to the generations that the churches now need to reach. I would bet money that our CEO could not find his checkbook if I gave him 5 minutes right now to go find his textbook. But if I asked him to Venmo me or PayPal me or give me through Gively, he could do all of those things in 30 seconds. So it's really important to understand that this idea of digital giving, having a link that says, hey, donate to this cause. We're currently doing a drive for kids' uniforms. Donate right now. We just need $10 from this many people. That sense of urgency, putting it in front of people's faces, that's a no-brainer. But here's like a really interesting thing to conceptualize, and it's coming from someone with personal experience about this. If I were to attend your church, I would probably spend an entire year attending your church where never once did I sit and listen to the pastor and have a check or cash in my pocket. The generations that are growing up grew up with this technology. Asking them to give online is second nature to them, but asking them to write a check is going to be something super uncomfortable, and they might not even have a checkbook. So this doesn't mean throw out your traditional giving platforms. It doesn't mean don't accept money traditionally, but there's becoming a larger divide in terms of how comfortable these generations, the gap between them has become in terms of how comfortable they are with technology. That asking newer people under 30 to give online is second nature. They probably won't think twice about it, and if they're gonna give, they might give right then. We're seeing with these statistics, crowdfunding campaigns, GoFundMe accounts are getting massive amounts of money. People are generous, but you have to be in front of them, and the church has to be where congregations, believers, and non-believers are. The world is in the social media space, and so the church has to be in the social media space as well to take advantage of that group of people and of people's generosity, and are able to reach them and put their missions in front of those people's faces so that there is visibility for the good that the church is doing constantly in the communities that they're in. Here at First Door, we don't specifically advocate for a specific giving platform. We want to educate you about the importance of giving. There's two that we've seen used a lot. That's PushPay and Church Center. It's not an endorsement to say that use them. We don't make a commission if you use them. We're not affiliated. The point is to put in your head, if you look at the ways that you get the word out, if you look at the ways that you promote your church to your congregation and to others that you're trying to get to attend your congregation, when you look at those methods you use, if you find that social media is not containing a way for them to give, or you feel that your social media presence is not getting engaged, and it's not something that's daily getting engagement, then we would encourage you to look for things like these companies, some way to embed a digital giving platform, because the statistics show that the church is online. That people are online, which means the church needs to be online, because the church needs to be where the people are, because Christ moves with his church. Ultimately, what we want you to come away from this is a sense of urgency, and hopefully we think that you've learned something with this. So we hope that you've seen the urgency in getting the word out to social media. It's not just something that people consume memes on. It's not just something that people scroll through for 30 minutes. The entire world is spending hours of every single day consuming social media. And if the church is going to reach people, then the church needs to be in the social media space, reaching people and hitting them in that space and saying, hey, God loves you and the church loves you and we'd love to see you on Sunday. And getting that message in front of them every single day with constant posts and constant engagement, it reaches people, and also it massively helps your church financially in you growing in members and monthly giving.
Brandon, thanks for the help. Thanks for talking to us about these things, because money matters, and it really does matter in the kingdom of God. It takes the blessing of God, the work of the people, and cold hard cash to get this stuff done. Thanks for helping us today. We're going to take a short break, a little bio break, refreshment break, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Just a moment.
Good night. We thank you for just having this opportunity to worship, God. We just thank you for just being with us through everything, God. And we just ask that you remove any iniquities, God, that you remove anything that's stopping us from worshiping. Sorry about that. Again, we ask that you remove anything that's stopping us from worshiping.
within me. You're in my heart forever. Wake within me, wake within me. You're in my heart forever. But not forsaken. I've been set free. Out of the darkness to your glorious day. Oh! Love never ending. Oh, oh, oh. You are alive in us. Nothing can take your place. You are all we need. Your love has set us free. You are alive. You are alive in. Oh, guys, I've done a string and the whole guitar's gone. I'm just gonna have to stop and retune because I'm like using a special tune in there. Listen, not gonna wait for the walls to fall. Forever, he reunites and dreams fall. The arms of angels, they're standing side.
We're in the home stretch here, the last hour of our digital church conference today. And up next is DJ Iverson. DJ is a part of the First Door marketing team, and if you're a subscriber to the Social Media Glance to Giver program, you've already seen his work, all the creative design that goes into the social media components that are in that program. DJ and his team are the creatives who create this product. DJ, of course, is an artist, loves to connect great design with the story of the gospel. And today he's going to be talking to you about some free tools that are out there that can help you with good design, and also talk about the why of design and why good design actually is important. Take it away, DJ.
Hi, my name is DJ Iverson, and I am blessed to be the creative director for First Door Marketing. And I want to talk to you today about the importance of good design in the church. I have a background in advertising. I have my degree in advertising and graphic design and marketing, and I've been working professionally in ministry for over 20 years in youth ministry and as an associate pastor. And one of my passions is the intersection of art and the church, and how we can utilize good design in the church to get the best message possible out into the world. So I'm going to share with you today 3 things that I like to share with all of my friends in ministry when it comes to the importance of good graphic design in the church. And so here we're going to start this off. The first thing is we have the best message possible. You know this, you're in ministry, you're a part of your local church. You know the importance of sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. And sharing news is exactly what design is. Kind of the difference between art and design is art with a specific message that you're trying to communicate with someone. If I'm trying to sell you a pair of shoes, I have a specific message that my art needs to get across to you. If I'm selling you a car, I have a specific message about that car that I'm trying to show you and to get you involved in, a story to make you want to purchase that car, for that car to become a part of your life. And just like what other advertisers do, just like what other entities do, we have a message that we want to share, that we want to invite people into, and that's the good news of Jesus Christ. So as we're talking about design, what we're talking about is we're talking about creating art that makes people want to engage with Christ, that makes people want to engage with the gospel, that makes people want to engage with your church or your community group or your small group or your pastor, whatever it is that your ministry is. We want to help communicate that message of that ministry to the people in your target audience so that they can engage and they can enter themselves into that story. That's why good design matters. We have the best message in the world to share, so let's share that well. My second point, you are communicating something. Whether you realize it right now or not, you are communicating something. Your church, your ministry, your pastor is communicating to your target audience. And the question is, what are you communicating and how well are you communicating? See, some folks, they have a great social media platform, they have beautiful artwork at the church. That sends a message to the community. And some folks, some churches, don't have any presence whatsoever. They don't have any good design or thoughtful design out there at all. And to be honest, that's sending a message too. And sometimes the design looks like it's rushed or put together by a kid. Well, that sends a message as well. You are communicating something, whether you realize it or not. One of my favorite graphic designers, a guy named David Carson, explains it this way. You can put the same message out in two different ways and communicate two very, very different stories. Take a look at this image. This is an image of two garage doors from the same alleyway. One garage door has spray painted, no parking, real quickly. Another person has a nice, neat sign that says, no parking. So here's the question. If you had to park in front of one of those garage doors, which one would you park in front of? Well, I'm gonna park in front of the sign. Why? Well, a person's well thought out. They're probably pretty reasonable. They want to communicate clearly. They went to the store, they took the time and effort. They'll probably give you a warning before they come and tow your car. This other guy that spray painted no parking on his garage and spray paint, he'll probably slash your tires and break your window. Same words, same message with two very, very, very different meanings. The message that you're communicating through your social media, through your marketing, is out there. And so the question is, are we going to take that seriously or not? Are we going to put our best foot forward or not? Are we going to give God our first fruits when it comes to good design or not? And lastly, keep your design simple. I know a lot of us don't have a lot of extra time. We're in ministry. We don't have a lot of extra resources. We're in ministry. One of the blessings that I want to pass on to you that I tell all of my friends in ministry, keep your design simple, keep it clean and straightforward, and it's going to look so much better. It's a trap I fall into still after 20 years of this. I want to add and make things complicated. And the truth is, we typically have a very simple message that we want to get out to invite people in, to make people feel welcome, to make people feel warm or loved or comfortable, or we're sharing a specific message from the gospel. Keep it simple. Let the message be the message. Why use 10 words when 5 words will do? Why use 6 fonts when 1 or 2 will do? Why cover up a whole image of God's beautiful people with text when maybe the image speaks for itself? It's these little design tricks that, well, to be honest, they save a lot of time, but they also help us communicate so much more clearly what we're trying to get out to the people that we're trying to reach. And so that's a blessing that I want to give to you, a tip that I want to give to you, and just something that I remind myself of daily. Keep your design simple, straightforward, and clear, and the people will thank you for that. It'll help clear everything out, and it'll help alleviate a lot of stress because, like I said, we don't always have a lot of time in ministry, right? We don't always have free time to spend hours and hours on advertising, but it's important and it's something that we do want to share. Keep your design simple. That'll help yourself out a ton. Here are a few apps that I recommend to help you with some basic design to get your church or your ministry started. First, Canva is great. It's a great website. You can kind of create anything on there, from slides to social media, to moving backgrounds. It's real simple. They have some pretty basic templates. It's plug and play. Love it, easy to use. An app that I like to use even just on my phone is called Over. It's great for cropping photos and adding text and uploading to social media. SparkNotes is another great one if you're looking to put together slides or other basic design. And even simple things like the photo filters that Instagram has loaded in on its program. You know, swipe over on a photo and maybe you can take that photo from good to great, from something simple to a little bit better. These are all great tools for getting started with just some rudimentary basic design. And if you're looking to step up a little bit, if you're looking for something a little bit more creative, with something a little bit more depth, and something that, to be honest, nobody else could create on their own, that's where First Door Marketing comes in. We've got a ton of great designs at the ready for you. We've got customizable designs. We've got customer service that will allow you to give feedback on what you like and what's working in your community. So feel free, come check us out.
DJ, thanks. Beautiful art and the faith have gone together for millennia, and we know that the truth of the gospel can really oftentimes best be displayed through good design and through beauty. We thank you for your presentation today. Next up to end our conversations today is Glenn Akins. He's a familiar face to many of you around the BGAV family. Glenn has been with us for a couple of decades, and he is, I like to say, he's the Yoda of data. If you've ever looked for help with demographics or research and understanding your community better, Glenn is probably the person that you talk to. He's a leader in all of religious circles on looking at demographics as a way to plan and do strategic outreach. And he has also been a pioneer in working with the establishment of digital or online churches. He has worked with many churches around the state of Virginia to help them get launched, and would be happy to have a conversation with you too, I know, as well, as you're considering this. It's always good to sit down with somebody who knows where you're trying to go because they've been there, and Glenn is certainly that. Had a chance to sit down with him in the studio a couple weeks ago, and we chatted through just some of the big picture things that he sees and why it is you maybe want to think about having an online or digital church at your location. So with that, here's the conversation with Glenn. Well, Glenn, thank you for joining us today to kick off our conference. I'm with Glenn Akins. Glenn is the Associate Executive Director for the Baptist Journal Association of Virginia. I fondly like to think of you as the Yoda of the data. You have some of the keenest insights and understanding of our churches and what they are facing in their native neighborhoods, the demographics that are going on around them. You've got decades of experience in dealing with this and understanding the history of these churches. And so it's really appropriate that we would kick off a conference thinking about the future of the church by drawing on a lot of the knowledge and history and experience that you have. And I just want to start off, Glenn, with a question really straightforward. You've been studying demographics for a long, long time, specifically as they relate to churches. What are you seeing in the demographics going on in our culture at the moment that would indicate to you that this is a great time or a bad time
for a church to be contemplating the launch of an online campus and overall digital presence? What do you think?
It is a great time because the landscape not only is changing, but it has changed. And like lots of things, like lots of changes in our culture, sometimes our churches are a little behind the curve. It takes us a while to figure out that it's not just a blip, it's a trend.
Right.
So we're really in the catch-up mode in terms of what's already been going on. So some of the work that's been done by Pew, especially at a national level, is pretty informative for us. So you can think back to, say, 2015, and there was a break point in church attendance patterns, and they've been declining for a number of years now. So the game has changed, is the point. And if we don't figure out that it has changed and how it has changed, we will miss, we'll end up behind the curve and miss some opportunities. So Pew has done some great work on church attendance. We've dropped below, looks like 50% of the folks in the nation that would say that they're church attenders. And that's not the culture that we were raised in, and it's not the culture in which many of our pastors or church leaders were trained for. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a, catch your breath and figure out what and how do we enter into this new chapter. So yeah, there's been some significant changes. I'd say another one, not just about church attendance, but about who is attending. So you think about the generations, for instance, and that, again, 2014 was kind of pivotal nationally. So we've got younger generations that are coming of age, both the Gen Xers and the millennials. The next batch, the Gen Z, is still growing up, basically, but have already passed, in terms of size, the silent generation, one that preceded us. So there are some significant demographic changes, not just cultural changes that we need to be mindful of. The technical change that has happened, of course, is the rise of the portable devices, mobile devices, social media. The numbers of people engaging in social media is just staggering. And we passed a point in the early 2010s. So let's just call it already 10 years ago now.
Sure.
That the weight of how we connect, how we communicate has shifted. I guess you will still remember your first cell phone.
Oh, yeah.
I just thought it was a nifty thing to play games on, just the really, that was scary. But it does way more than play games, obviously, now. It's the primary communications device.
And we barely use it to even talk. Most of the communication it does is not even the spoken word like it was invented to provide.
I don't know about your house, but the only reason that we have a wired phone now is to screen calls.
You know who the salespeople are.
It's the junk calls. So the whole thing is flipped in the last 10 years.
Sure.
And like on lots of things, it's not unusual that the church is slow to adapt to those kind of technical changes. But what it does mean is if we don't figure out how to use the tool, and with those age groups, the rising age groups who are born with the devices in their hands, we're going to be missing a huge swath of the population. So I'd say the game is on. I remember, I don't remember what year, but there was a game called The Sims.
Yep.
You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Where you could enter with a basically the game was called Third Life, but you could enter with a simulated personality. And so some of my earliest exposure to this was some young guys who were experimenting in the role of monks living in this simulated environment. And I just thought that was so goofy. But there was something to that. There were people spending time there and you could engage with them. And I just thought it was just a really clever tactic. Today, though, if you're not on Facebook, if you're not on YouTube, Twitter and Instagram, you're missing it. And so I just think it's an awesome time for churches to plug in to those kind of tools and opportunities. But none of us, at least none of my generation, were taught any of this as a tool for ministry.
Yeah.
So I think we've crossed a boundary, pretty significant one for us in the culture.
I'd say it's awesome and it's exhausting to think about for a pastor who's trained exactly like you just described. You know, we got people who are paying attention to this conference today who are struggling. They're here because they see what we see, but they're worn out by COVID, all the stresses of keeping the church financially afloat, the burden of growing the church, and then to have these other layers are exhausting. So we're also looking for ways to help pastors and church leaders use these resources in ways that don't further tax the church system, but bring them some relief. So we're working hard.
If I were a pastor, I would be hunting for some young adults, leaders who are savvy. This is second nature to them, to help me think about how to do things different, do the same thing but different. How do we connect, communicate? How do we serve?
Yeah.
One of the, I'll call it a byproduct of COVID has been the surge, an enormous surge in people searching online, particularly for things related to spirituality, especially prayer. And I just wish more of our churches had an online prayer ministry, which means you have to have online prayers.
Yep.
Ready to come alongside folks who are hurting and searching and anxious, and there's a whole laundry list of emotions coming out of COVID. But
sure,
it's just another opportunity for us to connect in ways. We used to have people drop slips in boxes for prayer requests. Yep. Well, that's not how it's working now. I guess you could do that electronically, but it'd be way better if we were praying with them online.
Yeah.
Real time, in other words.
I really see this as a missionary moment for churches. Do you agree with that? And if so, why or why not?
Well, two reasons. One is because the demographics have shifted and more people are online. And second, we've just gone through a crisis, not completely out yet, where people's attention has been refocused on different things. They are asking questions, they're hurting. It's like a whole new mission field has opened for churches. And if we can equip and commission some of our folks, I'd say particularly younger, tech-savvy folks, we could be connecting with more than we could imagine in this one area of prayer, and helping people with some of the angst, the uncertainty, the fear that's going on in their lives right now. So I'd say it's timely.
Yeah. Well, and once COVID is hopefully in our rearview mirror before long, even after that, anxiety of life is always going to be present. People are always going to need care and concern and prayer.
And just because we declare COVID is over doesn't mean the anxiety goes away right away.
Exactly.
That'll be resident in this block of the population, and I mean that worldwide, for years to come. It's like a permanent scar. And I think we can speak into that. I think we have resources, personal, spiritual resources that we can bring to bear, mostly online for that size audience. Most of our churches don't have the physical infrastructure by that I mean physical and on-site infrastructure to respond to that volume. But it can be handled online.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just think it's a huge opportunity for our churches if we'll walk into it.
So Glenn, I'm going to throw you a curveball here. I got a question for you related to the integration of congregations, the virtual side and the congregation that's in person. Are there reasons, first of all, to make them mindful of each other, and do you have any thoughts or ideas about how that might happen?
Well, I always think it's helpful for the in-person congregation, the in-person worshipers, to be mindful that there are viewers from all over the place that are part of the worship experience. I really have had some fun experiences helping for those churches that have launched an online campus, for instance. A lot of them have systems that allow them to map out where folks have logged in from.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a real-time mapping. But it has surprised me at the number of folks who are so zoomed in, their maps are so zoomed in to whatever their area is, they can't see beyond the borders of the screen. So I keep asking them to pull back. And on one of our churches, I finally got them to zoom out to the US, and somebody had logged in from California. So this is a church that was in somewhere in Central Virginia. And I guess they were just thinking about their time zone or, you know, their little area of Virginia. But to have somebody logged in from California was mind-blowing for me and them. And all I could think is, what time is it there? And are they in their PJs and they logged into the 11 o'clock service or what? But it was a powerful lesson about how many of us, when we launched this, were just simply not thinking big enough.
Mm.
And the underlying question for that is, what if it works?
Yeah.
In other words, leaders, planners, whoever's implementing, really needs to be thinking bigger than they ever have for like launching another campus or starting a new church or something. This one has the potential to be worldwide. Another church, and this one was in Northern Virginia I worked with, the Monday after their first Sunday online, one of their former attenders, members, military who had been transferred to Germany, emailed back to the church saying that they'd enjoyed watching the service, but why hadn't they included the children's worship materials so that they could use them with their German neighbors?
Oh, wow. Cool.
It's very cool. Now, for that church, and a lot of our churches that have military personnel, they have got to think worldwide. Mm-hmm. It's not just military, but that's the obvious one. And so we had this long conversation about, do you understand that the federal government is paying to ship your missionaries all over the world? Why don't you equip them as if they were missionaries and support them appropriately?
Beautiful.
Well, I mean, we get so caught up in the technology. You know, we have the right plugs and wires and switches and knobs, and we forget about their end, the viewer's end. How do we equip, support, train, deploy them? So we've got a missionary force that's scattered all over the world. One of our churches, seems like it was Manassas, up in Manassas area, launched, I guess it was earlier this spring, and had former members somewhere down in the Caribbean who wrote back in, and they were so ecstatic to be able to reconnect and started making some substantial contributions, and that's when they perked up. And I thought, and it's true, but that's not the motive for doing it, but there's a revenue stream sitting out there that could be tapped. Again, not the motive, it's the byproduct of having done something well. So you've got folks that want to support this, you just don't know who or where they are now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the biblical framework for this. What would you say would be the substance or the foundation for a biblical/theological approach for church leaders as they are framing the question, should we start an online campus?
Well, if you've ever wrestled with the go into the world piece, this one does it. and it does it in what I would consider to be a cost-effective way. So I do think there's a mandate back there. I'm not saying the mandate's for technology. It's just that the technology enables more people to go into the world. Our model, both at a local church model and at a foreign missions model, international missions model, was we had to deploy people to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it needs to be either or anymore. I think it can be both and. Our own folks are already deploying, we just never considered them missionaries. So how do we commission them? The real verb tense is as or while you are going, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, they are going, so why don't we equip them as they're already going? So that's what's behind it for me. I think about the Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, uttermost verses, and how this enables us to do that in ways that we never fathomed before.
So Glenn, you've outlined for us what the moment looks like. You've given us a little bit of biblical framework. Talk about some of the hurdles. It can't all just be easy pie in the sky. So what do you see as the difficulties for churches launching online campuses?
Well, let me give you a couple of what it's not. What's not the greatest hurdle, and that is money and equipment. Those are real, but those are not the biggest hurdle. The biggest hurdle is a mental one. It's the mental model that we have of what it means to be and do church. So for a very long time, we thought it meant to gather people here in a place at a time. Mm-hmm. Now, depending on the size of the group, the here might be anything from a home to some elaborate building. But what COVID has done to us is to say you can't gather in homes or large places. So the shift from being come here to a scattered or distributed model is one tension that is at work in this model. And a second one that I'd say has been exacerbated in the last, I'll just say 20 years, has been a shift toward what some would call an attractional model. So come here for this thing. Mm-hmm. Bigger, better, louder services with video or whatever. And what has gotten lost in the shuffle is that in our essence as a people, we are a missional enterprise. And when we have been distributed or scattered like we have been, people can't come to our thing. It's not safe. Have we figured out how to go to them? So the two tensions are between gathered and scattered, and then attractional and missional. And so our folks with Fresh Expressions have been working on this for some years now. But COVID has made it blatant, obvious that we've got to figure this out and leverage what's going on in the culture right now and taking advantage of a new model.
Yeah. What would you say to a pastor who is working with a congregation whose mental model is very much stuck in attractional and gathered and all the other things that would prevent them from successfully moving into it? How do you lead in that environment?
Well, I just tell them to take two and call me in the morning.
Two whats?
Oh, it just takes a lot of work with, first of all, most of our pastors were trained in that model. So the first challenge is in the pastor's own head. And can he envision another, not a substitute, not a replacement, but another model? How do we do both? That's the first hurdle. And then the second hurdle would be for that pastor to work with their leaders and walk them through that. I have a great story from one of our churches here in the Richmond area. Actually, lots of our churches do special Christmas pageants, all indoors. this church was renowned for theirs. And then COVID hit. They were ready for this production because they'd been at it for months. They finally decided that we could do some drive-through Christmas experience. Every family stays in its car and have stations. Now, churches have done that. Some churches have done that for quite some time. So they canceled their production. They did one of these drive-through multiple stations Christmas thing, and at the end of the route, every family, every household was given a resource kit to take home to celebrate Christmas with. I thought it was a brilliant switch on short notice. So a lot of disappointed musicians and performers changed gears and became props in these stations along the way.
Yeah.
It was an awesome switch, but it was a great example of how to read it and roll with it. Read the moment and roll with it to a new model. And I wish we could replicate that kind of quick shift in lots of places, but it needs to be done at lots of levels, not just one performance. You know, what does that mean for worship? What does it mean for group meetings or Bible studies, children's ministries, you name it. But that same kind of creative thinking and the ability to make a turn on short notice. Yeah. So churches are doing this. I think the churches that went to the, leverage the drive-in movie theaters, the outdoor.
Yeah.
I thought that was clever. I think I don't know that that's a long-term solution, but I think it's going to mean finding lots of smaller groups meeting in homes where the relationships are trusted. It's just going to take that kind of thinking all throughout our system. But for most of us, we weren't trained that way. It really feels like more of a New Testament kind of model that we know in homes.
Yeah.
And I think we can leverage the moment. It's just that most of us weren't set up that way, weren't trained that way.
Well, everything you've said resonates with your other point that this isn't about equipment or money or technology. This is about the right mental model that's going to, well, you work with online churches, you work with campus churches who are trying to establish online churches. What resources do you bring to churches who are contemplating this question?
Well, it starts with answering questions and coaching, because for a lot of our churches, this is like a foreign language. So there's a lot of, well, how do we do this, or how do we do that, or what does that look like? So there's a fair amount of coaching that goes on behind the scenes. I've got a guy who used to be an online campus pastor who can go to some of these churches that want a face-to-face, sit down with their leaders and talk through it. How does it work? A lot of time they get trapped in the equipment questions. How much does this stuff cost, and what widget do we need? And those are important questions, but that is not the real issue. The real issue is, what's the ministry model that you're going to use for those who have been dispersed throughout the world? How do you handle online prayer requests, for instance? Are you set up for online giving? You've got to figure out the digital equivalencies for your ministry model.
Okay.
So how do you do prayer? How do you do counseling? What do you do about working with young children? There are security issues on all of those. So there's a security component that often gets shoved to the background that can't for this. Most of the time, folks want to start thinking about, well, how do we broadcast our worship service? Well, as challenging as that is, that's one of the easier ones to pull off. Maybe a couple of cameras and a switcher, maybe more lights, better audio, some of those kind of things. But it's some of the auxiliary pieces that go around it for a full-orbed ministry model that are a little more challenging. You have to worry about security, about screening your children's workers, screening your youth workers, just as if it were in person. Some folks forget that as well, but that's a real piece. So I think the opportunities are mind-boggling. How do you do adult Bible studies, or what many of our churches would call Sunday school classes? So you need trained facilitators to know how to work inside a Zoom group. So there are some technical skills required for those folks, but at heart they need to be Bible teachers. They need to see themselves as an online teacher. Yeah.
Well, Glenn, I want to thank you for spending the time with me today. Thanks for taking the time to help our church leaders out here as they think about these issues. And we'll look forward to talking to you more. Appreciate you.
We'll look forward to more online campuses.
Well, gang, that wraps up our presentation for today. But before you go, just want to take a moment to let you know a couple of things that you may have missed at the top of our presentation today. First and foremost, thanks to Tim Holt and the team at First Door Marketing. You've seen their expertise on fine display today, and I want to just tell you that they are a fantastic team to work with. Tim also works with BGAV on our social media that you see coming out of the BGAV office. And I just want to encourage you, as your church is thinking about moving more thoroughly or deeply into the digital space, that you consider using this company. The other thing I want to say to you is that this program is not complete. We intend this to be an ongoing conversation. One of the ways that's going to happen is that this coming Sunday at 1 o'clock, we will re-air this live cast today, and we will also have that manned for live chat. So if you have other folk that you'd like to invite into this conversation from your church, please feel free to do that. We will engage them in live chat on Sunday, and then later next week, once all the videos had the chance to get properly compressed, we'll be sharing links with you to download it and view later. As a word, there are bonus features that will be available in that content. We had too much to offer today to fit into the time that we had allotted, and I hope that you'll come back to take advantage of listening to some of those other conversations and picking up those resources. For now, that's it. Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to hear more, please get in touch with me. My email is somewhere on the screen here or here or here, and probably over here in the chat box. We'd love to hear from you more, and appreciate your time today. Thanks, and God bless.